I'm Detective Chris McMullen. I work for the Ben Salem Police Department. In 2005, I was a detective in the Criminal Investigations Division. It was in the middle of the night. A headquarters call woke me up. Whenever there's a homicide, they call everybody in. So I take a deep breath and know that it's going to be a long night. In this particular case, I went right to the crime scene. There was marked patrol cars there. Nobody can go in, nobody can go out.
McMullen is informed that there's a 27-year-old individual no longer alive whose name is Christian Rojas.
Christian was from Costa Rica. He had grown up there. He went to a gifted high school, and he had become a skilled web designer and computer expert. One of the reasons he was in the United States was to work for a computer firm.
When you enter a crime scene, you don't want to disturb anything. I was always taught the first thing you do is put your hands in your pockets so you don't screw anything up by touching it. I entered the living room and it was obvious to me that there had been some type of ransacking. Cushions were ripped open, furniture was moved, everything was out of place.
This is not the usual burglary. This place has been destroyed. Whoever was in here was convinced there was something of great value to them concealed somewhere in this house, and they tore the place apart to find it.
I saw a photograph that was originally on the wall. It was broken, and it had 3 people in it, 2 men and a woman. It was determined that the decedent was one of the 2 men in that photograph.
It's interesting that this photograph has been purposely destroyed. Is that something that speaks to emotion, where someone is so angry they break the picture? Or is it because people hide things in picture frames as well?
As I started walking towards the bathroom, I'm seeing some blood on the walls, some on the carpet.
So this begins in the hallway. The victim is being savagely assaulted and retreating toward the bathroom to avoid the attack. When McMullen pushes open that bathroom door, he smells an unmistakable smell that you never, ever forget. The smell of death.
I remember seeing the victim in the bathtub, and I thought to myself, who could do this to somebody? It was an awful, terrible crime scene. The tub was filled with water, but the water was black, and there was a pillow over the face of the decedent. He had had a sock stuffed in his mouth, socks wrapped around his neck.
McMullen notices the imprint of a human face in blood on the ceramic wall of the bathtub. This is very, very violent.
I remember thinking that this poor individual did not die a quick death. It seemed to me that he had been beaten and tortured. It just made it very evident to me that this person more than likely knew who it was who attacked them, and that there was some type of emotional anger, motivation behind it. In the water, there was just various condoms floating. They had been removed from a box and thrown into the water, almost like a symbolic gesture.
McMullen's mind drifts back to that crushed photograph.
The condoms reinforced my thinking that maybe the 2 men in the photograph both had an interest in the female, and maybe this had to do with jealousy and had gotten way out of hand.
The level of violence indicates personal motivation. It says emotion. And emotion often comes from love interrupted. McMullen thinks about this based on his own experience. You have evidence of home invasion, evidence of a robbery, evidence of search for valuables and or narcotics. But then you have overkill in the bathroom. It's like a mixture of potential motives. Very difficult to say whether this is all about the search and all about the failure of the search, or is it about I hate you because you've been involved with my girlfriend? So he's left with this state of confusion.
Richard, where's the guy that called us in?
Right over there.
McMullen interviews Joseph Lear right away. He knows that he's got to start with the first person that found the body.
He was very nervous. He was running on adrenaline. He had probably experienced the most terrifying thing that he had ever gone through in his life.
What can you tell us about Christian?
He was one of my best friends.
Joseph Lear and Christian met in Costa Rica at some point. Ben Salem was the Lear's hometown, and when Christian relocated to the United States, he suggested that Christian come there.
Even though he had only been in the United States a few years, Christian did well with people. He was an affable person, someone that people wanted to be around, and he was also very much in touch with his family still.
He had family back in Costa Rica, a mother and a couple sisters. He would send them most of his money, so he lived very modestly.
Mr. Lear can't imagine Mr. Rojas having an enemy in the world. Mr. Rojas has never used narcotics, has no criminal record, which McMullen confirms. He is your everyday, innocent person carrying on a career in the United States.
When I showed Joseph Lear the photograph that had Christian and the other couple in it, he told me that that was Mark Russo and his wife, Sarah.
He reports that they used to live together. They were roommates with Christian Rojas, but Christian moved out. The question becomes, under what circumstances did Christian move out?
I had this thought go through my mind that, is this some type of a love triangle?
Then the question becomes in McMullen's mind, well, who loves who? The old expression is certainly true in affairs of the heart. Two's company and three is a crowd. Was Christian the crowd, or was he part of the company? And somebody decided it was time for him to go away permanently. 27-year-old Christian Rojas is found murdered in his home in Ben Salem, Pennsylvania. Detective McMullen believes there could be, might be, a love triangle at the basis of this crime.
At this point, we wanted to find out about Mark Russo and his wife, Sarah. But before I was able to even obtain contact information from Mark Russo, he actually showed up at the police station on his own.
Did Russo present himself because he's fishing for information from the police about what they know or what they may suspect? Or is he just concerned about his friend? McMullen considers those 2 points.
Sometimes people show up with good intentions. Also, sometimes people show up because they want to interject themselves into the investigation. We needed to speak with him and find out where he was and what he knew.
So, how exactly did Christian come to live with you and your wife?
Well, we actually met in Costa Rica.
He explained that he had actually helped Christian find work here in the United States. He did live with him and his wife, although him and his wife weren't married at the time, but the relationship was blooming, and in a gesture to allow them their privacy, Christian then moved out and got his own place.
Mark pointed out it wasn't acrimonious. They remained friends after this.
I asked Mark, did Christian ever have any type of attraction to your wife, or was there anything like that going on? And he said, absolutely not. He was not concerned about that, and just like Joe Lear, he seemed to be sincerely upset and blown away by what had happened.
McMullen finds him to be quite believable. So Mr. Russo is out as a suspect.
With any homicide, you want to learn the victimology. So we wanted to know about, did he have any roommates? Was he in a relationship? Where did he work?
He felt like a girlfriend.
Well, he does have an ex.
Mark told us about a girl named Heather that Christian had been involved with.
He was under the impression it was over. Though, about a week earlier, the girl had reached out to Christian.
She needed a place to stay, and Mr. Russo said that Christian was a warm-hearted, caring person, and he would not allow anyone to suffer because of his unwillingness to take care of them. So he allowed her to stay with him in the very recent past.
Well, that added something new to what we were looking at. I wanted to find out what Heather's last name was, and when was the last time he saw her.
I only met her once or twice. But I can ask around. By the way, what'd you guys do with Christian's car?
Russo said, I had this old car, green in color, that had a lot of miles on it, and Christian didn't have a car, so I gave it to him.
The car was not anywhere to be found in the apartment complex where Christian lived. So at that point, the car was missing.
Where is it? The only place it could be is in the hands of a murderer.
Knowing that there was a car involved and that the car was now missing was huge. That then led us to believe, okay, if we can find the car, then maybe we can find the killer.
So McMullen puts out this description of this vehicle stolen in the course of a homicide. So if any policeman anywhere sees this car in motion, they're going to stop the car and arrest the contents.
In the meantime, we're looking for clues. We're looking to link things together.
Often at a crime scene, you can't clearly see a body. The lighting isn't very good. The position of the body obstructs certain wounds. So it has to be done in a coroner's office under bright light.
The rate of decomposition showed that Christian was probably dead for approximately 2 days before he was discovered.
It's a horrible situation. The victim suffered enormously during the course of his demise. He had lacerations and head wounds from being bludgeoned with a blunt instrument of some type. He'd either been knee dropped or kicked in the chest with a serious bruise in the sternum.
There were other injuries to his body, but they were just methods of torture. What had caused Christian's death was actually blunt force trauma and asphyxiation.
The coroner says that the knot of the tube sock around the neck was sufficient to restrict the air supply. The victim had bitten through his lip with his teeth, struggling to get air in his system.
There were no defensive wounds noted on Christian's body at the autopsy, indicating that whoever had attacked him had immediately overpowered him and that there wasn't much of a contest.
So McMullen believes he's probably looking for somebody quite a bit bigger than Rojas to be able to control him, to attack him in the manner in which he was attacked. Who would do this?
Christian's family was in Costa Rica, and obviously word had gotten to them, and they were devastated. For me, the driving force is always the victim, getting justice for the victim and their families. So in this case, it was all about Christian.
Well, I've known Detective McMullen for 28 years. He doesn't stop. He'll keep drilling down and drilling, and if he gets assigned to your case, chances are you're not going to be able to run from it.
Any hits on Christian's car? Nothing yet, but these phones have been ringing all morning.
Word travels quickly. It had gotten out in the community that somebody had been murdered in their home, and that police had yet to identify and/or apprehend the suspects.
Detective McMullen.
This is a scary crime that has happened in a suburban town. People are reacting to it. They were horrified.
In Bencio, our crime that we're dealing with is mainly thefts and property crime, burglaries. We don't get a lot of homicides. If we get half a dozen homicides a year, that's a lot for us.
This was about the 4th homicide that I've been involved with since I'd become a detective. So there's definitely pressure. There's pressure from the boss.
McMullen and his department are overwhelmed by a number of tips that are meaningless and somewhat nonsensical from people who are in panic mode. Oh my God, the violence has entered Ben Salem, because it's never been true before. The community's reacting to their fear level is what's happening, and they're creating these false people who may be murderers all over the place.
When tips come in, I mean, we have to look into them, and if they're good tips, obviously, then they're helpful to us. Sometimes the problem is you get inundated with them, and if a lot of them really don't have any value, you still have to look into them, and it takes up time and manpower and resources.
But one tip does come in that has some value.
I've been contacted by a journalist for the Bucks County Courier-Times. He had received an email from a gentleman who was a friend of Christian Rojas's.
Check out this email I just got.
The email went on to explain that Christian Rojas had recently been offered a dream job in Costa Rica for an American company who had relocated there. The writer of the email goes on to say that Rojas's current employer was very distressed about Rojas leaving his employment.
Christian had told this person that his employers had the ability to do bad things and that he was somewhat frightened of them.
At first, the information that Christian's employers would want him dead seems a little far-fetched, but for McMullen, there was a catch.
Christian Rojas worked for a cash advance company run by Anthony and Mario Moretti. And having done a little bit of research on them, it was verified their father had had some mafia ties.
Now that raises McMullen's eyebrow.
If there was a connection like that, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to think that if Christian was leaving the company under bad terms, that something may have escalated to violence.
The next step is obvious. Who are these brothers? They're either part of this or they're not, and McMullen has to find the answer to it. Many leads have come forward, none of which have much value, but now McMullen is pursuing a new lead that may have some meaning. Two brothers that might be connected to the Italian mafia in the city of Philadelphia and South Jersey.
Police say the victim has strong ties to organized crime.
Throughout the city's history, there has been organized crime, theft, racketeering, gambling.
Police this afternoon combed the shooting scene at 6th and Catherine for evidence.
Connected with a number of different families. The Scarfo family was a particular family that was very involved.
Now, in 2005, the Italian mafia was a mere shadow of its former self. That doesn't make them any less dangerous. They remain more than capable of extreme violence.
Well, now we're wondering, did they have something to do with this? So we contacted them by phone and made arrangements to go and visit them at their office. I'm trying to determine whether or not they have any type of anger towards Christian. But they seem to be fond of Christian.
They both say Christian Rojas was an incredibly competent computer programmer, that Rojas was their go-to guy to solve problems when they encountered them in the business.
How did you guys feel about Christian leaving the company?
They were obviously not happy about that, but they liked him so well that they wouldn't stand in his way.
They seemed sincere in the fact that they wanted him to succeed. They seemed legitimately distraught over what had happened. We were able to verify their alibis. They were all home at their respective residences.
Despite their connections to nefarious people, they're not involved in this.
They definitely wanted the crime solved. They made that very clear. They offered their resources. They really wanted to take an active role in what was going on.
Did they take the safe?
Wait a minute, what's safe?
And they told us that he had a safe that he kept cash in. He would cash his paycheck and then convert it to money orders to send home to his family in Costa Rica.
McMullen was certainly aware that there was no safe found in Christian Rojas's house. Somebody took it. someone who knew it was there?
At this point, McMullen is starting to get some answers, but he really doesn't have a full-fledged suspect yet.
There's a safe that was stolen and his car is missing. So at this point, it's a robbery and a homicide. We've spoken with everybody and we're satisfied with those people and what they've had to tell us. But there's still his ex-girlfriend, Heather, and at this point, she's the only wild card because we don't know where she is. We don't have a last name for her.
Later that afternoon, McMullen's partner says that we've looked over the answering machine that Christian had in his house, and we discovered these messages. You need to listen to these because it's really kind of interesting.
Christian, please, I don't know what else to do. You said you would help me. I need your help really badly, please.
The first one was Heather, and she was distraught. She was crying.
Why won't you please talk to me? I really, really need to talk to you. Please answer the phone.
The next message was from Heather again.
Christian, call me the back now.
But her demeanor had gone from distraught to angry.
Heather's statements certainly put a different light on how you look at her.
After hearing those messages, it started to make me think that it's possible that she could have been involved with this homicide.
She would certainly know his habits. She would certainly know about his safe. Who is she?
So the next day, Mark Russo did get back to me and he told me that he was able to get her full name and she was identified as Heather Lavelle. We went into our master names index and we pulled a photo of her.
She's 36 years of age. She's very tall, natural blonde, considered to be very attractive.
We learned that she was a very educated person and there was a time that she had a very good paying job in the insurance industry.
She was in a assistant vice president position making well over $140,000 a year.
So here is a college graduate, tall and lovely, making very good money, who all of a sudden has to stay with Christian Rojas because she's fallen on hard times. How could that be true?
Upon doing an inquiry on her name, it was discovered that recently Heather Lavelle had been arrested for possession of drug paraphernalia. Unfortunately, due to addictions, she had lost her job and lost her home.
People who become involved in depression, in losing their way, believe that drugs are the magic that will make that all go away. The difficulty is, it is magic, but it's black magic, and it will destroy you every single time.
Aside from the arrest for the drug paraphernalia, there was also a domestic disturbance. It showed that Heather Lavelle had been in a fight with her boyfriend, James Savage. She just basically wanted to get her belongings and leave.
But after police showed up, she decided not to pursue any further charges, despite signs there had been physical violence.
We started to compile background information on James Savage, and we learned that he did have a criminal history. In fact, he had a violent criminal history.
Savage is a widower, but there's a report from his wife that he had threatened her with a rifle, and she had obtained a protection from abuse order against him.
He was a big guy. He's a physically intimidating guy. He's about 6'4", well over 250 pounds.
Given the violence from the crime scene, it was likely somebody with a lot of force and ability to exert that force on another person. Savage matched that description.
So McMullen says, okay, Heather's fallen on hard times, and she asked Christian if she can stay there because of this issue between her and her current boyfriend. What if her current boyfriend misunderstands that and doesn't believe that Christian Rojas is offering help, but he's somehow re-involved with his girlfriend?
We got the address of James Savage from the police report and went to that residence in an attempt to make contact with him.
Can I help you?
We're looking for James Savage.
We are met by his mother, Jackie Savage. She told us that her son wasn't there. She verified that he was having a relationship with Heather Lavelle, and that he told her that they were going to go to the shore for the weekend.
Jackie tells police that the last time she saw them, they were unloading some of Heather's belongings out of Jackie's car, and they're transferring it over to a different car.
What kind of car?
She says to Detective McMillan, they were in a small green car. I'd never seen that car before.
I didn't think Heather had a car.
Oh, really? Well, my. Now, isn't that interesting?
As far as we're concerned, they're most likely driving Christian's car, which means that they're connected to the homicide.
There's always a moment in a criminal investigation. It's a moment of euphoria. When somebody says something that means nothing to them and means everything to you. Everything.
You said they were heading to the shore. Which shore?
He didn't specifically say where, he just said to the shore.
Ben Salem, Pennsylvania is very close to the Atlantic Ocean, to the Delaware coast, to the Maryland coast, North Carolina, Virginia. It could be anywhere, really.
You mind giving your son a call for us?
Okay.
Do you mind if we come in while you make that call?
Oh, sure.
When people kill, they are in an emotional state like they've never been in their lives. They're desperate. They don't know what to do. They just want to run. What are you going to do, James? You're going to go to the shore? You're going to swim to Europe? Is that your plan?
Hello?
Jimmy.
What? What's going on? You told me, that you were going to the shore. Are you all right?
Are the police looking for me?
Yeah.
Can you wire me money?
I don't know where you are to do that. Maybe you should call and talk to the cops
No.
and tell them what's going on.
No.
Maybe she can call.
What are you trying to do? Who call?
Heather.
Why? She don't want to talk to me either.
He didn't say anything about coming home or coming back. He had made mention that she may never see him again.
I love you. I don't know what's going on, son. If you guys are in trouble, then you need to talk to the cops or something to find
No,
out.
we can't talk to the cops. Can you wire me any money or not?
Where?
Bye.
It seemed as though, from the context of the short phone call, that they were on the run. They seemed desperate for money. There was concerns as to what they were going to do next.
Savage is in desperation mode. He's violent, he's a drug addict, and now he's scared. What's he capable of? Anything.
We wanted to find James Savage, and at the same time, we were worried about Heather's safety because it wasn't clear to us what her role in this was. Did he use her to get into Christian's apartment? Did he force her to flee with him? So at that point, we decided we wanted to track the cell phone used by James Savage.
They ping the locations on that cell phone, comes back to the Delaware coast.
We have no reason to believe they have friends or relatives there where they could stay, so we decided to start checking local hotels. There was one hotel that was checked, and it was determined that they had just checked out earlier that day.
They go in that motel and contact the manager. She provides them with a registration form and says that Savage was accompanied by a tall, blonde girl who said nothing during the registration process. They check the surveillance footage, and there is James Savage and Heather Lavelle.
Exterior video cameras from the same establishment showed them getting into a green car and leaving, which is the car that we believe belonged to Christian. We asked if we could go inside the room, and according to the hotel staff, the room had not even been cleaned yet.
In In the hotel room, there are stained towels, red and black.
It appeared as though somebody had dyed their hair in a very quick manner without cleaning up afterwards. I don't think that people just hit the road and just abruptly dye their hair color for no real reason at all.
They alert law enforcement they're still in the suspect vehicle somewhere on this coastal highway and that they are now changed their hair color. Police publicize these photographs of these two individuals to be placed in the evening news and newspapers.
The next day, there was a call on the line from the police in Nags Head, North Carolina. They had located the green car that we were looking for.
They make a traffic stop. As the officer steps out of his car to approach them, they take off. He gets back in the car and pulls out a high-speed pursuit. Close to 100 miles an hour down this highway. They are coming south and they are smoking.
During this chase, the police employed stop sticks. It's something that you roll out in front of a fleeing vehicle, and when the car goes over it, it punctures the tires.
And they run through it in that small green car and shred the tires off the rims, and the car grinds to a stop in the ditch.
Both the driver and the passenger got out and ran in two separate directions.
Now the chase is on. Only this time it's on foot. Desperation causes this behavior. You are terror-stricken. You're not thinking clearly. You're thinking, feet don't fail me now. Detective McMullen's two primary suspects have been pursued by the police in Nags Head, North Carolina.
Police! Throw me your hands! Go, go, go.
They refused to stop, and it turned into a long, drawn-out pursuit.
Police!
The reality is, when you run from the police, you're not going to escape. You're just going to be very tired and soaking wet when you get arrested. Why go through the exhaustion? Turn around and put up your hands.
Ultimately, they were both apprehended by officers. Our next step was we have to get down to Nags Head. So we made travel arrangements pretty quickly. The first thing we did, we had gotten a search warrant for the car, and we found clothing that we believed belonged to Christian. It had blood on it. We found a set of brass knuckles, and those brass knuckles also had blood on them.
So we have a trail of evidence that comes out of Christian Rojas's house into the trunk of the car being driven by James Savage and his companion Heather Lavelle. Yet another nail in their respective coffins.
We talked to James first. He's a big, scary guy, and you could tell he was just mad at the world. And having seen what he had done, it was unnerving to be seated next to him. We told him, look, we're down here to talk to you about Christian Rojas. We know that you were there. We know that you were involved.
I may have been there, but who's these other dudes?
He said that he and Heather had been at Christian's house and that 3 other people came in and did a home invasion robbery, and that he and Heather barely got out. So he basically told us a story to try and see if we would buy that. We asked him, so why did you steal Christian's car? And he's like, well, we just grabbed the first set of keys we could and we wanted to get away. You know, obviously they had taken the time to pack that car and we knew that.
Savage is just puking lies, said McMullen. He just can't stop.
Smoke.
McMullen doesn't want Savage to see him as an enemy. He wants Savage to calm himself to some degree.
We brought up Heather. We asked him, did something bad happen between Heather in Christian that you were upset about, and he started to talk to us when we approached it that way.
I just went over there to talk to the guy.
James Savage had a jealousy issue with Christian due to the relationship that Heather had had with him.
He says there's an exchange of words between he and Christian, and a fight breaks up.
He said Christian picked up a set of brass knuckles. He got really angry about that and disarmed Christian, and then really started to assault him in a very violent manner.
Savage says Christian Rojas becomes unconscious. So he and Heather leave. And when they return, they find him dead in the bathtub. Oh my God, how could this have happened?
He said, so we tried to make the whole thing look like a robbery by tying up his body after he was already dead.
It's a preposterous story to try to explain away his lack of involvement in this crime. So ultimately, despite his attempt at lying profusely, he's incriminating himself in the death of Christian Rojas.
So if James Savage wasn't going to be truthful, maybe Heather would be truthful to us. We want to hear her account of what happened. One of the first things we said to her was, we said, are you okay? Did he force you to come down here?
No.
I'm not under any duress, was the words that she used. It made me believe that she could have been a willing participant in this homicide.
Tell us about your relationship with Christian.
It didn't last very long, maybe about a month.
She had told us that for a while he was pretty happy with her, but then when he realized that she had a drug problem, he had to let her go. We talked about her fall from grace, how at one time she was doing really well. And once she started smoking crack cocaine, there was no turning back. She would beg, borrow, and steal to get money to buy drugs.
So when Heather broke up with Christian Rojas, she goes and finds another boyfriend. When drug users find another person like themselves, who has the same taste for narcotics, there is no limit to what they will do. They will take their grandmother's rings off her fingers when grandma is in her coffin if they can convert it into money to feed their habit.
After James Savage and Heather Lavelle had that domestic dispute, Heather left James. She had nowhere to go, and she wound up going back to Christian and asking him for help, and he let her in.
Heather knew that she could go to Christian because Christian was kind, Christian was loving, Christian cared about people.
But then you went back to James.
Yeah.
Because, of course, she still needs narcotics. You have to help me. I need more drugs. Then she tells Savage about Christian, and she also tells him he has a safe in his house.
It was starting to become clear to us that Heather was the brains behind this. Heather still had a key to Christian's house.
They wanted drug money, and Christian was the potential source.
They found a safe and broke it open. They found like $40.
What the hell is this?
Now they're angry because they wanted to have a good score and they didn't get it. So they waited for him to arrive home.
What are you doing here? What the hell is going on here?
Where's the money, Christian?
When he arrived home, her and James confronted him.
Answer her! I just sent some money home, okay? Everything that's left is in the safe, okay?
Why?
James is in a jealous rage and immediately sparks fly.
Where is it? I swear, I'm not lying, no!
The fight between Christian and James was like David and Goliath. There was no contest.
You got money somewhere!
Heather was very paranoid that somebody was going to hear them. At some point, she took a sock and jammed it into his throat.
Christian's last moments were terrifying.
James threw the condoms in the bathtub because he was angry that Heather and Christian had slept together. It proved that jealousy was definitely a factor in this moment. In a panic, they tried to make the whole thing look like a robbery.
Heather knew exactly what she was doing. She was the architect of the scheme.
She brought Savage into Christian's house, and she enabled everything to happen. As far as I'm concerned, she is absolutely as guilty as Savage of killing Christian.
Both James Savage and Heather Lavelle were extradited back to Pennsylvania.
They were charged with homicide and related offenses. They were originally facing the death penalty. However, the trial never occurred because both of them pled guilty.
They both were sentenced to life in prison, where they remain to this day.
I was just happy that the case was resolved and that they were convicted and going to jail, and they were never going to be in society again where they could give in to their demons of addiction and hurt anybody again.
McMullen is like any other detective in the United States. Anywhere, really. You are faced with a plate full of spaghetti, tangled in a gigantic knot. Your job is to unravel that knot. And McMullen did precisely that. He unraveled it carefully and slowly and technically to where this is the result. The people responsible, life in prison. It's how it's supposed to work. It's how it does work. Because of detectives like Detective McMullen.
I did get to meet Christian's family. They were there when the sentence was actually imposed. I know that they gave victim impact statements.
They were very vocal about the fact that the conviction, while important, didn't bring him back.
Christian was loved by a lot of people. You know, he was a good soul. He was a trusting person. Unfortunately, he had opened his door to some evil people. Human nature can get very low.
Christian Rojas, 27 years of age, truly innocent, well-educated, comes to America to live the American dream. And what he discovers is the American nightmare in the person of one Heather Lavelle. Not Christian's plan, but certainly the result. How sad is that?
The snow never really melts in some corners of Alaska. It just buries the secrets deeper, layer by layer, until the wind remembers them. That winter of 1999, the air around Fairbanks was colder than usual, and the night had that eerie stillness that only comes before something terrible. They found the body near the edge of the Chena River, half covered in frost, as if the earth itself had tried to keep her hidden. No footprints, no tire tracks, just the faint outline of a struggle on the frozen ground. She was 22. Her name was Emily Hartwell, college student, part-time waitress, loved to hike, loved the wilderness. That's what everyone remembered, but nobody remembered the night she disappeared. The file would stay open for more than 2 decades. And when it finally broke, it wasn't the cold that cracked it. It was something darker that had been waiting all along. The police back then thought it was a robbery gone wrong, a simple theory to calm a terrified town. But nothing about it was simple. Her purse was still on her shoulder, untouched. Her car keys were in her pocket. There were bruises on her neck, thin, circular, precise. Whoever did it knew what they were doing. A hunter, maybe. Someone used to taking life quietly. The autopsy confirmed what they feared: strangulation. No sign of sexual assault, no defensive wounds that could speak for her. Just silence, and the snow swallowing every clue before sunrise. Detective Samuel Price took the case first. He was new in town, ex-military, not used to the kind of quiet that hides horror. He promised her parents an answer. But after weeks of searching, the trail froze. Locals stopped talking. The bar where she worked went out of business. Her apartment was emptied out within days. Everything that could have told a story disappeared into the fog. And yet there were whispers. A pickup truck seen idling near the river. A man who never came forward. A cigarette butt found near the scene. But the DNA technology in 1999 couldn't speak for it yet. They sealed it in a plastic bag, labeled it, and stored it. Forgotten. Years passed. Fairbanks grew colder, older. People moved on. Emily became a name in an old file drawer, one of many, until the DNA Backlog project began in 2017. Hundreds of old samples retested, digitized, compared. A program funded by the state to bring peace to families who'd stopped hoping. When they opened the Hartwell file again, it was dusty, brittle, but complete. Inside, the cigarette butt, the autopsy photos, and Price's handwritten notes. Smudged, almost unreadable. Feels like someone's watching me, he had written once. Locals avoiding eye contact. Someone knows more. The lab work started quietly, routine. The technician ran the cigarette sample through CODIS, the National DNA Database. Nothing, but she didn't stop. She uploaded it to a genealogical service that cross-referenced public ancestry records. That's when something blinked on the screen. A partial match, a distant relative living in Anchorage. That small match started a storm. Investigators built a family tree that stretched across decades, tracing bloodlines, marriages, and relocations. One branch stood out, a family that had once lived near Fairbanks, close to the Chena River in 1999. The name was Lars Benton, a quiet mechanic, never arrested, never suspected, married twice, divorced twice, known for his temper, his isolation, his long drives at night. In 1999, he was 34 and working at a local garage. He smoked. The same brand found at the scene. His name wasn't in any police report, but he'd been seen once with Emily at a diner, according to a witness who'd never been questioned again. When detectives knocked on his door in 2019, he looked older, thinner, his eyes pale like the frozen lake behind his house. They told him they were reopening old cases. He nodded, said he didn't remember much from that winter. But the moment they asked about Emily, he froze. The silence that followed was the same kind of silence the snow makes when it covers something it shouldn't. Forensic teams collected a DNA swab while he signed the consent form with shaking hands. The results came back in 6 days, a perfect match. 20 years of waiting collapsed into one line of digital code. But before the arrest warrant was even printed, Lars packed his truck and vanished. His house left behind half empty, fridge open, coffee still warm. His cell phone left on the counter with no signal. They traced him through the wilderness for weeks. State troopers, drones, search dogs, nothing. It was as if the forest had swallowed him. Detective Price was long retired by then, but when he got the call, he came back. Gray hair, slower walk, same eyes. He stood by the riverbank where Emily was found. Everything looked the same. The snow, the silence, the weight of the air. He said it felt unfinished, like the forest was still keeping score. Then, 2 months later, hikers found a wrecked truck at the bottom of a ravine 50 miles from town. Inside, skeletal remains, a rusted revolver, and an ID card with Lars Benton's name on it. The gun was registered to him. The bullet had gone through his skull. Suicide, they said. Case closed. But something about it felt off. The coroner's report listed inconsistencies, the angle of the gunshot, the position of the body, the lack of blood spatter inside the cab. It looked staged. Someone had wanted Lars to take the blame, even in death. The DNA match was undeniable, but what if it had been planted? The file was sealed again, this time marked solved, but Detective Price kept a copy. He couldn't let it go. He believed there was someone else, a name that never made it to paper, someone who'd lived in the shadow of that garage, someone who'd learned how to disappear. Local rumors returned. People remembered strange things. A second man seen near the river, driving a similar truck. A mechanic's apprentice who quit right after Emily's death and moved south. No record of him after 2000. When the police tried to trace the VIN number of the wrecked truck, they found it had been registered under 2 names, Lars and someone called J. Benton. No one knew who the J was. No relatives, no address, just an initial. The more they searched, the more it felt like the case was eating itself. 20 years of frost had not only preserved the evidence, it had preserved the fear. The locals still avoided the riverbank. Children grew up hearing about the girl who vanished into the snow. Her parents had died years before the case reopened, never knowing what happened. All that remained of Emily Hartwell was a cross made of driftwood by the water. The wind knocked it down every winter, and every spring someone, no one knew who, put it back up. When journalists asked Price about closure, he laughed. He said closure doesn't exist in Alaska. Things just freeze. Evidence, memories, guilt, they all stay, waiting for the thaw. But then he paused, mentioned something strange. When they found Lars's truck, they discovered a second DNA profile on the revolver. Partial, degraded, but human. Not Lars's. The lab never identified it. Case still technically solved. officially. But in Fairbanks, people whisper that someone's still out there, the one who watched, the one who made sure Lars took the fall. The story never made national news. It was just another cold case checked off a list, one more headline swallowed by winter. But every now and then, hunters near the Chena River report seeing something. A man in a heavy parka, standing on the ice long after dark, motionless. Some say it's Price revisiting the scene. Others swear it's Lars. No one ever gets close enough to find out. The prints vanish by morning. 20 years later, when the DNA unit in Anchorage ran an unrelated test from another case, a missing hiker found near the same ravine, they found the same unknown partial DNA profile. The same one from the revolver. It didn't belong to Lars. It didn't belong to the victim. It was someone else, someone who had been near both scenes. The state never made it public. But someone leaked it to an online forum for true crime enthusiasts. The post went viral overnight. Users traced every known record of the Benton family, every mechanic shop in Fairbanks, every apprentice. One name resurfaced, Jason Benton, nephew, last seen leaving Alaska in 2000. His driver's license was never renewed. An Anchorage journalist started digging, but her articles were pulled after 2 days, her website taken down. She received an anonymous email before she disappeared from social media. Some things should stay buried in the snow. No signature. Only coordinates attached. Back to the Chena River, the same spot where Emily's body was found. That's where the story starts again, the circle that never closed, the cold that never ended. In Alaska, the past doesn't die. It hibernates. The sound of the river is different in winter. It doesn't flow. It groans, like something alive struggling beneath the ice. Locals say you can hear voices if you stand long enough on the frozen bank. Not wind, not the trees, but whispers from the ones who never made it home. When the journalist vanished in 2020, that's exactly where her car was found, parked off an access road, door still unlocked, engine cold. The coordinates in the email had led her there. Inside the car, a notebook, open to a half-written line. He's not dead, he's watching me. No name, no sign of her, just the endless snow and the faint smell of gasoline in the air. The state troopers treated it like another missing persons case. No foul play, they said. Maybe she wandered off, maybe she fell into the river. But people in Fairbanks remembered the old story. They said it was happening again, the Benton curse, they called it. The same silence, the same unease, the same faces avoiding questions. Someone even claimed to have seen headlights near the river that night, cutting through the fog before vanishing toward the woods. No tracks were ever found. The next morning, it snowed again. Thick, heavy, perfect for erasing. Detective Price, 81 by then, saw the news on television. He hadn't been back to Fairbanks in months. His health was failing, his hands shaking, but the look in his eyes was still sharp. He called the station, asked for updates. The younger officers told him politely that the case was under control. He hung up without replying. Then he packed his old field coat, the same one from 1999, and drove north, alone. On the road, everything felt familiar. The cracked asphalt, the long stretches of white silence, the gas stations that looked frozen in time. Somewhere past Nenana, the radio cut out, static, then a voice, faint and distorted, like a broadcast from another time. He could swear it said her name, Emily. He pulled over, checked the dial, but the signal was gone. Maybe the cold was playing tricks on him, or maybe some stories refused to stay quiet. When Price reached the Chena River, the sun was already low. The ice reflected the sky like glass, pink and gray and endless. The journalist's car was still there, taped off, guarded by one young officer who looked barely 20. Price flashed his old badge. The kid didn't argue. The old detective walked straight to the edge where the snow met the ice and stood still for a long time, the same place he'd stood 2 decades earlier, the same emptiness staring back. He thought about the revolver, the cigarette, the truck, all the lies frozen in between. Then, almost instinctively, he looked toward the tree line. That's when he saw it, a shape moving between the pines. Tall, steady, watching, a silhouette wrapped in fur, face hidden by the shadow of a hood. Price took a step forward, then another. The figure didn't move, just stood there, silent, until a gust of wind blew across the snow and suddenly it was gone. No footprints, no sign of life, just the sound of cracking ice echoing across the water. Later that night, Price checked into a small roadside motel. He couldn't sleep. The image of that silhouette kept flashing in his mind. He poured himself coffee, opened his laptop, and searched for the journalist's articles. All gone. Deleted. But a cached version of one remained, partially archived. In it, she mentioned the name Jason Benton and something about an inheritance dispute after Lars's death. She claimed a property outside Delta Junction had quietly changed ownership the same week Lars's truck was found. The new deed was under a shell company with no listed directors. The address of the company traced back to Anchorage, specifically to a post office box once rented by Lars Benton. Price printed the record, circled the date. March 15th, 2019, the same week Lars supposedly killed himself. He knew what it meant. Someone had used Lars's death as a cover. Someone alive had taken everything he left behind. But who? The next morning, Price drove to Delta Junction. The road was empty, miles of wilderness. The coordinates led to a small cabin hidden between spruces, barely visible from the main road. It looked abandoned, boards nailed across the windows, no smoke from the chimney, snow piled high around the door. He stepped out, boots crunching, breath turning white. He knocked once, no answer. Then he noticed it, a faint light flickering inside, candlelight. He pushed the door open. The air inside was thick with dust and old wood. On the table, a row of photographs, Emily's face, the riverbank, Lars's truck, the journalist's car, all printed, all marked with red pen circles, and in the middle, a new one, a photo of him, taken recently, standing by the river. Someone had been following him, watching him. Price felt the air tighten around him. Then he heard it, a floorboard creaking behind the door to the cellar. He drew his old revolver, his hand trembling, and stepped forward. The stairs creaked with each step as he descended into the dark. The smell hit him first, damp earth, gasoline, and something metallic. Then he saw it, a small generator humming in the corner, powering a laptop and an old scanner. On the screen, the same genealogical DNA database that had cracked the case years ago. Someone had been running searches, updating profiles, adding names. There were dozens of files open, each one labeled with a year and a town. 1999, 2003, 2007. Each one linked to a different cold case across Alaska, and in the user field, one name repeated, J. Benton. Before he could move, the floor above him groaned again. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. He raised the revolver toward the stairs, but the lights flickered and went out. Silence, then a voice, calm and close from the dark above. "You shouldn't have come back, Sam." Price froze, that voice. It was unmistakable, deep, raspy, older but familiar. Lars Benton's voice. Impossible. Price's pulse hammered in his ears. "You're dead," he whispered. The voice laughed softly. "No, I just changed my name." The stairs creaked again, a shadow descending slowly. Price fired once into the dark. Nothing. The echo rang through the cabin, then faded. When he climbed back up, the front door was open, the candle extinguished. Only fresh footprints in the snow leading into the forest. He followed them until they vanished near the tree line. There, stuck in the bark of a tree, was an old photograph. Emily's face, torn in half, her eyes crossed out in red ink. He knew what it meant. The story wasn't over. Someone had orchestrated the entire thing. Lars's death, the evidence, the genealogy leak. Someone had rewritten the past. Back in Fairbanks, a storm hit that night. Roads closed, communication lines cut. Price barely made it back to town before the blizzard sealed everything. He went straight to the police station, handed over the printed property record and his statement. The younger detectives listened but didn't believe him. They said he was chasing ghosts. But when one officer, curious, checked the cabin coordinates the next morning, the structure was gone. Burned to the ground overnight. No footprints, no tracks, no remains. In the ashes, they found a melted laptop battery, half of a license plate, and a charred photograph, the same one with Price's face circled in red. Something had followed him home. For the next few nights, the old detective started hearing noises outside his motel room. Footsteps in the snow, the soft click of a lighter. One morning, he found a cigarette butt on the windowsill, the same brand as before. He called the station again, begged them to reopen the file. They refused. "Case solved," they repeated. "It's over." But Price knew better. He'd seen what the snow could hide. He knew that in Alaska, nothing ever really ends. It just waits for another thaw. The snow fell hard that week, smothering Fairbanks in silence. Roads disappeared, power lines bowed under the weight of ice, and the night sky flickered with the faint green of the aurora, a beauty that didn't belong to the living. Inside room 17 of the Evergreen Motel, Detective Samuel Price sat by the window, the revolver on the table beside a half-empty thermos of coffee. The cigarette butt from his windowsill lay in a plastic evidence bag. He hadn't slept in 2 days. Every sound outside, the crack of ice, the scrape of branches, the hum of wind, felt like footsteps. He was too old for fear, but this wasn't fear. It was recognition. The same feeling he'd had in 1999 when he first saw Emily's body. The sense that someone else was still there, watching, patient. At dawn, he drove back to the police station. The snowplows hadn't passed yet, and his tires crunched over layers of ice. He left deep tracks behind him, the only sign of movement in a town gone still. Inside, the young officer from the river scene, the one who had guarded the journalist's car, met him with a nervous smile. "Sir, the chief doesn't want you going back out there," the officer said. "They're saying you're disturbing an active investigation." Price raised an eyebrow. "Active?" he asked. "You mean the one you declared closed?" The kid hesitated. Someone reopened the case last night from headquarters. Price froze. Headquarters hadn't touched the Hartwell file in years. Who signed it? He asked. The officer checked the logbook, his brow furrowed. No name, just an internal code, JB99. Price didn't need to hear more. He turned and walked straight out. The snow was falling again, thicker now, as if the town was trying to hide itself from what was coming. He drove east toward the ravine where Lars's truck had been found years earlier. The road was slick, the air biting. When he reached the site, the yellow police tape was long gone, flapping like ghostly ribbons in the wind. He stood there for a while, looking down at the black scar of frozen earth where the truck had crashed. Then he saw something that hadn't been there before, a new cross, wooden, freshly built. Someone had been here recently. Attached to it was a small tin box sealed with tape. Inside, a single item, a cassette tape labeled Emily Final. The motel clerk didn't even look up when Price borrowed an old tape recorder from the storage closet. He pressed play, and the sound filled the room with static. Then a voice, female, trembling, Emily's voice, or at least that's what it sounded like. "If you find this," she whispered, "he's not who you think he is. He said he wanted to take pictures by the river. He said it was for the paper. He said..." The tape cut off. Silence. Then a male voice. Low. Calm. "Stop talking, Emily." Click. End of tape. Price replayed it again and again. That voice, the same rhythm, the same tone. He recognized it. It wasn't Lars. It was someone else. Someone who had worked near them both. A name from the early interviews, one he had dismissed long ago. Jack Benton, Lars's nephew, the mechanic's apprentice who disappeared after the murder. The J in every file, the ghost in every signature. Price sat back, heart pounding. The realization came cold and clear. Lars hadn't killed Emily. Jack had. And when the DNA evidence pointed to his uncle, Jack had used it to vanish. He'd staged the suicide, burned the evidence, and buried the truth under a blanket of snow. But that raised another question. Who was running the genealogy searches now? If Jack had vanished, who was logging in under his name? Unless he'd never left Alaska. That night, Price drove out again, following a trail only he could see. The blizzard had swallowed the road, but he pressed on, headlights slicing through the white curtain. He turned onto a logging path that wound through the forest, guided by instinct more than memory. After an hour, he saw a dim light ahead, a cabin, smaller than the first, its windows glowing faintly. He parked, stepped out, gun in hand. The snow muffled everything except the sound of his own breath. The door was ajar. Inside, heat from a small stove made the air shimmer. On the table, maps, photos, and notes pinned with red string, dozens of them. They weren't just of Emily anymore. They were of every woman who had gone missing in the region over the past 2 decades. Different faces, same haunting eyes. And in the corner, under a tarp, a shape. Price pulled it back. A mannequin dressed in winter clothes. A wig, makeup smeared to look like bruises, and pinned to its chest, a Polaroid. Emily's smile. The sound came from behind him, a floorboard creaking. Price spun around, weapon raised. "Jack?" he said. No answer. Just the slow tick of the stove expanding with heat. Then, from the shadows, a whisper. "You shouldn't have brought her name back." Price fired once, the bullet shattering a lantern. Darkness swallowed the room. He turned, stumbling through smoke and shadows, heart hammering. The whisper turned into laughter. "You think you solved it, old man? You think DNA tells the truth?" A match flared in the dark, lighting a face. Older now, gaunt, but unmistakable. Jack Benton. He smiled, teeth yellow, eyes empty. Truth is what survives the longest. Lies just freeze slower. Price raised his gun again, but Jack moved fast, too fast. The old detective fell back, hitting the table. The photos scattered. When he looked up, Jack was gone, the door swinging open to the night. The forest swallowed him whole. Price stumbled out after him, shouting into the storm. "You killed her! You killed them all!" The only answer was the howling wind. Then another sound. The faint click of a camera shutter. Somewhere out there, Jack was taking pictures, just like before. By dawn, the storm broke. Price returned to the cabin. Everything was gone. The maps, the mannequin, the photos, all burned. Only ashes and the smell of smoke remained. On the table, one new photograph. Price himself, asleep in his motel bed, taken from outside the window. He left that morning, shaking, his mind unraveling between the cold and the fear. But he wasn't done. He couldn't be. He drove to Anchorage, to the state archives, where all cold case files were digitized. He demanded access to the Benton records. The clerk hesitated but recognized his name. Hours later, Price sat before a computer, opening a hidden folder labeled Classified Evidence, 1999. Inside, scans of autopsy photos, field notes, and something strange. An unlogged fingerprint lifted from Emily's jacket. It didn't match Lars or Jack. It didn't match anyone in the system. But the analyst's note at the bottom said, "Print possibly altered, cut, stitched." Someone had intentionally damaged their fingerprints, someone who worked with their hands, a mechanic, or maybe a detective. Price stared at the reflection on the screen. The fluorescent light above flickered, casting his face in fragments. He thought about that day at the river, how easily the evidence could have been switched, how no one had checked the chain of custody. He had been there first. He had handled the cigarette butt. The memory stabbed through him like ice. Had he done it? He whispered the thought aloud, horrified by his own voice. No, he said. No, I didn't. But his hands were trembling, and the scars on his fingertips, old burns from a house fire years ago, suddenly felt like something else. Something deliberate. Something meant to erase. He stood up too fast, the chair clattering behind him. The clerk glanced up, startled. Price walked out into the blinding white of the parking lot, the snow reflecting the sun so fiercely it hurt to see. His thoughts twisted, looping, fragments of the past overlapping until he could no longer tell what was memory and what was guilt. Back in his car, the radio came alive again, static, then a voice, his own, recorded. If you find this, he's not who you think he is. The same words from Emily's tape, but this time it was him speaking. He shut off the engine, breathing hard. Outside, the snow fell soft and slow, covering everything like a confession written in white. The white kept falling, slow and heavy, as if time itself had thickened into snow. Price sat in his car, motionless, the static in the radio still whispering faint echoes of his own voice. He didn't remember recording anything, didn't remember ever saying those words. His breath fogged the windshield until the outside world vanished behind a gray film. Then, faintly, someone knocked on the window. He turned fast. A woman stood outside, wrapped in a parka, goggles on her forehead. Her badge flashed in the light. State Police. She gestured for him to lower the window. "Detective Price?" she asked. Her tone was careful, respectful, but alert, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "I'm Agent Dana Kovac, Anchorage Division. We need to talk." He hesitated, then unlocked the door. She slid into the passenger seat, brushing snow from her gloves. "You've been looking into the Hartwell case again," she said. "That file's restricted." Price didn't answer. She continued. "You reopened a classified database using a revoked credential, JB99. That code shouldn't exist anymore." Price turned his head slowly. "JB?" he repeated. "You think that was me?" Kovac met his gaze. "You tell me. The system shows the login came from this car an hour ago." Price stared at her, trying to breathe through the panic building in his chest. "No," he whispered. "Someone's using me." Kovac studied him, her expression unreadable. Then she handed him a small evidence bag. Inside, a photo, a Polaroid. Emily's body, as it had been found in 1999. But written on the back, in shaky black ink, were words he had never seen before. He watched her die. Underneath, a fingerprint smudge. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "From the archives," she replied. "It was left in your sealed evidence box, your signature's on the label." He shook his head. I never saw this before." His voice broke halfway through the sentence. Kovac exhaled, studying him carefully. "Detective, I've read the old reports, the cigarette butt, the prints, the suicide. Everything points to Lars Benton. But there's something off about your chain of custody. You were the first on scene. You collected the evidence yourself. There were no witnesses that night." He gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. "You think I killed her?" Kovac didn't respond immediately. "I think someone wanted you to believe you might have," she said softly. "And I think whoever that was is still alive." Her words hung in the air like frost. Price tried to focus, to rebuild the shattered timeline in his head, but everything blurred. The snow outside, the sound of his own heartbeat, the years collapsing into one another. He whispered, "Jack Benton's alive. I saw him. He's the one who—" Kovac interrupted. "Jack Benton died in 2001. Car accident near Valdez. We confirmed the dental records." He turned toward her sharply. "No, I saw him in that cabin 2 nights ago." Her face hardened. "Detective, there is no cabin. We checked the coordinates you reported. It's a frozen lake. No structure, no debris, nothing." Price's stomach dropped. He felt the edges of reality slipping. Maybe the cold was getting to him. Maybe it always had. But somewhere inside, a small, fierce voice refused to let go. "You're wrong," he said. "It's all connected. The tape, the photos, the login. Someone's rewriting history." Kovac nodded slowly. "Then let's prove it." They drove north, back toward Fairbanks, the silence between them stretching thin. The road gleamed like glass, the sky dimming into bruised violet. After 2 hours, they reached the outskirts of town. Kovac's radio crackled, an alert from dispatch. "Unidentified male found dead near Chena River Bridge. Possible homicide." Price's hand tightened on the dashboard. "That's the same spot," he muttered. "The exact spot." When they arrived, floodlights cut through the darkness. The scene was chaotic. Officers moving between yellow tape, snow kicking up under their boots. A body lay on the ice, covered with a tarp. The medical examiner nodded at them grimly. Found this morning. No ID. Late 40s. Gunshot wound to the neck. No tracks leading to or from the scene. Kovac crouched beside the body as they lifted the tarp. Price felt his throat close. The man's face was pale, frozen mid-expression, his eyes wide open, in his hand a cigarette butt, half-smoked, same brand. Kovac looked up. Recognize him? Price didn't speak. The features were swollen, frostbitten, but familiar. The jawline, the scars. That's Jack Benton, he whispered. The examiner frowned. No ID, but yeah, he matches old records. We'll run prints to confirm. Kovac stood, stunned. If he's dead, who did you see in the cabin? Before Price could answer, another officer approached. Ma'am, you need to see this. He handed her a folded piece of paper pulled from the victim's coat pocket. On it was a map, hand-drawn, detailed. It marked multiple sites along the Chena River, all labeled with years. 1999, 2003, 2007, 2013. Each one corresponded to a cold case, and next to 1999 in red ink, a note. He knows. Kovac turned to Price, eyes narrowing. Who's he? He didn't answer, because deep down, he already knew. Back at the station, the autopsy confirmed what he feared. The fingerprints on the body matched Jack Benton's. The DNA was conclusive. But there was something strange. The time of death was less than 48 hours earlier. That meant the man had died after Price claimed to see him at the cabin. He hadn't imagined it. Jack had been alive then. Someone had killed him right after. Later that night, Kovac reviewed security footage from the bridge. At 2:14 a.m., a figure in a dark parka appeared, dragging something across the ice. The timestamp glitched, skipping frames. Then, for half a second, the figure turned toward the camera. The image was grainy but clear enough. It wasn't Jack. It wasn't Price. It was someone else. Broad shoulders, narrow face, reflective glasses. Unknown. The database cross-check turned up nothing. No match, no ID. But when Kovac enhanced the footage, zooming in on the coat's sleeve, she saw something chilling. A patch. Old, faded, but readable. Fairbanks Police Department. Someone from the inside. That night, Price dreamed of the river again. Of Emily's face beneath the ice, her eyes open, her lips moving, as if trying to speak. He woke gasping, drenched in sweat, the room temperature barely above freezing. On the nightstand lay something that hadn't been there before. A Polaroid. Him and Kovac standing at the river, taken from behind. On the back, in the same shaky handwriting, she's next. Price stumbled out of bed, grabbed his coat, and ran to Kovac's room. Empty. The door unlocked, the window open. The snow outside untouched, no footprints. He shouted her name into the night, the sound breaking against the wind. No answer. Only silence and the faint crackle of the radio coming from his car outside. He climbed in, shaking, turned the dial, static again, then that voice. Kovac's. Soft, fading. He's here, Sam, it's not... The line cut off. A shadow passed behind his car, blocking the light. He turned. Nothing. Only the snow, endless and white. And then a knock on the window. Slow, measured, 3 times. The knock echoed through the frozen silence, slow and deliberate. 3 times. Then nothing. Price held his breath, his hand hovering over the revolver on the passenger seat. Outside, the night was thick and soundless, every flake of snow catching the light from the dashboard in a shimmer of pale blue. He leaned forward, wiped the fog from the glass, and saw only his own reflection staring back. Old eyes, hollowed by too many winters. He waited another 10 seconds, heart pounding, no movement. Then, faintly, he heard it again, a soft crunch of boots in the snow, moving away. He pushed the door open, gun raised, the cold cutting through his lungs like glass. The wind picked up, carrying fragments of sound, breathing, or whispering, or maybe the creak of the bridge nearby. He followed the tracks. They led away from the car, winding through the trees toward the river, fresh prints deep and heavy. Whoever it was, they'd been standing just inches from him. The moon hung low, caught in a thin web of clouds. As Price approached the riverbank, the prints stopped. Not faded, stopped, like the person had vanished mid-step. The ice below was cracked in spirals, the snow melted in small patches as if heat had burst from beneath. He crouched, touched the surface. It was warm, impossible. The sound of running water gurgled faintly below, but deeper, slower, as if something large was shifting under the ice. A voice carried from behind him, calm and close. "You shouldn't have come back here, Sam." He turned sharply, weapon raised. A man stood in the dark, parka hood down, face lit only by the dim glow of a cigarette. For a split second, Price's brain refused to process what his eyes saw. It was him. The same face he'd seen in old mirror photos from decades ago. Same scar above the brow. Same tired eyes. But younger. Maybe 40, not 80. "What is this?" Price rasped. "Who are you?" The man smiled, smoke curling through the cold air. "I'm what you left behind." Price took a step back, his boots slipping slightly on the ice. "You're not real." The man shrugged. "Neither is your version of the story." He flicked the cigarette into the snow. "You really think Lars Benton killed that girl? You really think Jack staged it? You were there, Sam. You just forgot the part where you pulled the trigger." Price fired once, the sound tearing through the quiet. The figure vanished. No body, no blood, just a scorch mark on the ice where he had stood. The echo faded into the hills. Price lowered the gun slowly, his breath shaking. He turned back toward the car. In the distance, its headlights flickered twice, then went out. When he reached it, the windshield was covered in frost, but words had been drawn in the condensation from the inside. "She's waiting under the ice." He drove. He didn't know where, only away. The road blurred into the horizon, snow swallowing the edges of everything. His hands trembled on the wheel, the lines of reality folding over themselves like the layers of frost on the glass. Kovac's voice still echoed in his head. "He's here. It's not what? Not who?" After an hour, he stopped at a gas station off the highway, one of those places that look abandoned until the door creaks open. Inside, a young attendant was restocking shelves, earbuds in. Price stumbled to the counter. "You seen anyone come through here? A woman? State badge? Dark hair?" The attendant pulled out a single earbud, frowning. "Couple hours ago, maybe. She filled up, said she was heading toward Nanana. Left this." He handed Price a folded map. On the back, written in hurried, shaky handwriting, "He's not done. Look under the bridge." Price's pulse quickened. "Which bridge?" But the attendant was already backing away, his face pale. "Hey man, you okay? You've got blood on your sleeve." Price looked down. His coat was streaked dark red. Not fresh, but not old either. He touched it. Sticky. He didn't remember being hurt. He didn't remember anything since leaving the river. He ran back outside, into the cold, map clutched tight in his hand. The road ahead forked in two directions, north to Nanana, south to Fairbanks. The handwriting on the note pointed north. He followed it. Hours later, the bridge appeared through the fog. Old steel, rusted, the same one from the photograph they'd found in Jack Benton's pocket. He parked, stepped out, flashlight in hand. The snow underfoot was soft, layered, untouched. No tracks, no movement, just the wind. Under the bridge, the ice glowed faintly blue from his light. He crouched, scraping away the snow, the beam catching something buried beneath the surface. A shape. Human. Frozen solid. A woman's body, her hand reaching upward toward the surface. He pressed closer, the beam trembling as it slid across her face. Kovac. He stumbled back, the air tearing from his lungs. She was beneath the ice, eyes open, mouth frozen mid-breath. His flashlight slipped from his hand and rolled, beam flickering across the bridge's pillars. That's when he saw the carving. Letters etched into the steel with something sharp. Samuel Price, 1999. He stared, disbelief clawing through him. The letters looked fresh, the edges of the metal still raw. He stepped closer, hand trembling over the inscription. Then he saw something else, a small metal box wedged into the beam below. He pried it loose, opened it with numb fingers. Inside was a cassette tape identical to the one labeled Emily Final. But this one read, Samuel Confession. His throat closed. He didn't want to play it, but his hand moved on its own, sliding the tape into the recorder he still carried from the motel. The static hissed, then a voice began. His voice, younger, steadier. "I told her to meet me by the river, said I wanted to help her with the story. She trusted me, they always do. She saw the file. She knew I had no choice." He froze. The words hit like a gunshot. The voice on the tape wasn't calm. It was cold, methodical, detached. "They'll blame Lars. I'll make sure of it. He's weak. He'll confess when the time comes." Price dropped the recorder, the tape continuing to spin in the snow, his own voice droning on. "If they ever find this, it means I failed, but at least the snow will keep her quiet." He stumbled backward, his mind fracturing under the weight of it. He remembered flashes, the cigarette smoke, Emily's frightened eyes, the way the river had glowed under the moon, his hands on her shoulders, the cold, the silence. He fell to his knees, the sound of the tape warping as the cold seized it. "No," he whispered. "No, it's not true. It's not. But memory has its own truth, and it doesn't ask for permission." Behind him, a voice spoke softly. "It's always been you, Sam." He turned. The younger version of himself stood there again, eyes reflecting the moonlight like shards of ice. "You just needed to remember." Price reached for his gun, but his hand shook too hard. The younger man smiled, stepping closer, his breath visible between them. "The river remembers everything, and now, so do you." Price fired. The echo ripped through the valley, scattering crows from the trees. The figure collapsed, disappearing into mist. He dropped the gun, chest heaving, tears freezing on his face. When the light from his flashlight settled again, there was no body, only the recorder half buried in snow, still spinning. Then faintly from the speaker, a whisper, Emily's voice. "I forgive you." The tape stopped. The silence after was absolute. Price stood alone beneath the bridge, the cold pressing down like a weight, his breath the only sign of life left in miles of white. The wind howled through the steel ribs of the bridge, carrying a low, broken hum that could have been the river or could have been voices. Price stood in the snow, revolver still in his hand, the cassette recorder lying motionless beside him. His breath came in sharp bursts, white clouds curling into the dark like ghosts escaping from his lungs. The whisper, Emily's voice, still lingered in his ears. "I forgive you." But forgiveness didn't thaw the cold in his bones. It only made it worse. He looked down at the recorder, half buried under the ice dust. The tape had stopped turning, the spool frozen in place. He picked it up with trembling hands, staring at the label. Samuel, confession. The ink was smeared, as if someone had written it in the middle of a storm. He pressed play again, desperate to hear it once more, to prove that he'd imagined it, that the voice wasn't his, but the machine only hissed. A hollow, endless static. The bridge groaned. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracked. Price's flashlight flickered. For a second, he thought he saw something moving on the far side of the river, a figure in black, barely visible through the fog. But when he blinked, it was gone. Only the snow, restless and shifting. He crouched again beside the ice, where Kovac's body lay frozen beneath. Her face had already lost color, her eyes clouded with frost. The hand that reached toward the surface was trapped mid-motion, as if pleading. Price pressed his palm against the ice above it. "I'm sorry," he whispered. His voice broke in the wind. He couldn't call for help. The radio had died hours ago, and his phone showed nothing but static when he tried to turn it on. He was cut off, alone. The snow had sealed the road behind him, and the forest pressed in like a wall of gray silence. He turned toward the truck, ready to leave, ready to pretend the bridge and the river and the tape were all just pieces of a fever dream. But when he opened the door, something fell from the passenger seat onto the snow. A folder, one he didn't remember having. On the front, Hartwell Case, 1999, classified. His breath caught. He flipped it open. Inside were copies of photos he had never seen before. High-resolution crime scene shots. Emily's body from different angles, her eyes half open, her throat bruised. The metadata in the corner of each image bore a date, January 12th, 1999. But the signature on the evidence label wasn't his, it was Jack Benton's. Impossible. Jack hadn't been a detective, he wasn't even with the police, and yet there it was, his name, his badge number, the official stamp of Fairbanks PD. Price flipped through the pages faster, his heartbeat loud in his ears. The last photo was of him, standing near the body, his hand holding the evidence bag. The caption below read, "Detective Price observes recovery, assisted by Officer J. Benton." He felt the air drain from his chest. There had never been an Officer Benton, he was sure of it, he would have remembered. But the photo didn't lie. Unless it wasn't him. Unless someone had built the story piece by piece, rewriting the past until the truth was buried under layers of paper and snow. He slammed the folder shut, his mind spiraling. Maybe it had never been about Emily. Maybe she had just been the beginning. He thought about the other names on the map, the other years, other bodies that had disappeared into the cold. If Jack had really been part of the department, if he had access to evidence, to archives, to DNA records, then the entire system had been built on a lie. He started the truck, the engine coughing weakly before roaring to life. The headlights cut through the white fog, revealing the bridge behind him one last time. For a moment, he thought he saw movement again. Someone standing where he had been seconds ago. He blinked, leaned forward, squinting through the snow. The figure raised a hand slowly, in a gesture that looked like a wave, then it was gone. He drove without looking back. Hours later, the storm eased and the faint glow of dawn broke through the horizon. He reached the outskirts of Fairbanks and pulled into the station parking lot. The building looked smaller than he remembered, the windows glowing faintly yellow in the half-light. Inside, the same young officer from before, Reeves, was behind the desk. He looked up, startled. "Detective Price, you're supposed to be in Anchorage. They said you checked out yesterday." Price's voice cracked. "Who said that?" Reeves frowned. "You did. You came in, signed the log, said you were closing the case for good, even handed me your badge." Price stared at him, speechless. "That's not possible," he whispered. Reeves hesitated, then reached under the counter. "I kept it for you, just in case." He placed it on the desk. Price's badge. Cold metal, his name engraved. But the photo wasn't his. It was the same man he'd seen by the river, the younger version of himself, or whoever wore his face. Price stepped back, dizzy. The room tilted. "Where did you get that photo?" Reeves blinked, confused. "It's always been that way. You sure you're okay, sir?" The old detective grabbed the badge, his hand trembling. The edges bit into his skin, grounding him in the unreality of it all. "Reeves," he said quietly, "if anyone asks for me, if anyone comes here claiming to be me, don't let them in. You understand?" Reeves nodded, unsure. Price turned and left. Outside, the sun rose behind a veil of clouds, casting pale light over the snow. He drove again, past the edge of town until he reached the frozen expanse beyond the tree line, the kind of place no one visits unless they're running from something. He stopped the truck, stepped out, and walked into the white. He needed proof, something real, something that could tell him who he was, who Jack had been, who Emily really was in the end. His only lead was the address he'd found on the classified folder, one final location scrawled in the corner. Hartwell Property, Mile 67, Old River Road. The drive was long and silent. The further he went, the less human the world became. No tire marks, no sound of birds. Just the mechanical rhythm of the engine and the endless curtain of snow. When he finally saw the mailbox, rusted, tilted, half-buried, it felt like a relic from another life. He parked, flashlight in hand, and followed the overgrown path to the cabin. It was small, half-collapsed, with frost covering the windows. He pushed the door open. Inside, dust hung in the air like fog. The walls were lined with newspaper clippings, all yellowed, curling at the edges. Every one of them told the same kind of story. Woman missing in Alaska, search ends in silence, no leads in Fairbanks case. He recognized the faces. Different years, different towns. Emily's was the first. On the table sat a reel-to-reel tape recorder, still plugged in, its reels motionless but wound tight. A note beside it read, in faded ink, play when you're ready to remember. He pressed the switch. The tape spun slowly, crackling to life, then a voice, male, calm, older. You don't remember, Sam, because remembering means you'd have to face it. We both worked for them. You found the girls, and I took the blame. It's how they built their story. One name to hate, one name to bury, and one to keep searching. They needed the legend. They needed the cold case. Price's heart stopped. The voice wasn't his. It was Lars Benton, alive. The tape continued. You didn't kill her. You found her. And when you tried to report it, they made you forget. They made all of us forget. They said it was easier that way, easier to control the fear. The room spun. Price gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Who are they? He whispered to the empty air. The tape crackled, and Lars's voice dropped to a whisper. You already know. Look behind the wall. Price turned toward the far wall of the cabin. The wallpaper was peeling, the wood beneath warped by moisture. He pressed his hand against it and felt a hollow space. He pried it open with the butt of his revolver. Inside the cavity was a small metal lockbox. Inside that, files, photographs, a black police ledger. He flipped it open, eyes scanning the names. Dozens of them. Victims, officers, all with matching dates. And at the bottom, in a separate column, cover maintained by FPD Cold Unit, Director J. Benton. His blood went cold. Jack Benton hadn't been a murderer. He had been the architect, the man who built the illusion, who fed the system stories of killers and victims to mask something much bigger. Every unsolved case, every DNA breakthrough, all fabricated to hide what really happened beneath the ice. And Price, he had been their narrator, the voice that made the horror sound like justice. The wind outside howled louder, slamming against the cabin walls. The tape clicked off, but the machine didn't stop spinning. A new voice replaced Lars's, warped, layered, mechanical. Story complete. Proceed to next file. Then static. Price stepped back slowly, realization breaking over him like a flood. He wasn't investigating the story. He was the story. The cabin trembled as the wind pressed against it, a long, low groan that seemed to come from beneath the floorboards rather than the world outside. Price stood frozen, his breath visible in the stale air, the tape still spinning on the reel-to-reel. The machine clicked once, twice, then began to play again, without him touching it. The same mechanical voice, cold and toneless, repeated the line. Story complete. Proceed to next file. Then a faint whir, followed by the sound of typing. Actual typing, as if someone invisible were sitting at a desk nearby, entering notes on a machine that didn't exist. Price looked around the room. The light from his flashlight quivered across the walls, catching on the hundreds of clippings plastered there. Each one fluttered in the wind, leaking through the cracks. Proceed to next file, the voice said again, louder now, and then silence, until a new voice replaced it. Detective Price, it said softly, almost human. You've come far enough. He spun around, revolver raised. Nothing but shadows. The voice continued, closer now. You were never supposed to see this. We built it carefully. Every photo, every headline, every memory, but you kept digging. Who are you? Price demanded, his voice breaking. Where are you? The air flickered. The cabin lights, if they were even real, dimmed for a second. Then, standing by the doorway, a silhouette began to form. At first translucent, like frost gathering in midair. Then clearer, a man in uniform. Fairbanks police patch. The face was blank, smoothed over, featureless except for the outline of a mouth that never moved. Price aimed his gun, finger trembling on the trigger. You're not real, he whispered. Neither are you, the thing said. For a second the words didn't register. Then the sound of the tape behind him shifted, the reels spinning backward. He turned toward it. The machine now played a series of overlapping voices, all his own, from different times, different ages. Him calling out for Emily, him shouting at Kovac, him whispering, "It's always been me," layered on top of each other until they became noise. The silhouette stepped closer, boots not touching the floor. "You remember the files," it said. "You remember the ledger. You spoke the names. That was your job." "My job?" "To tell the story, to make the fear sound true." Price's throat tightened. "I was a detective." The figure tilted its head. "You were an experiment." The word hit him like a gunshot. He stumbled back, clutching the table. The photographs on the wall blurred, faces melting into static. Each one now bore the same pair of eyes, his eyes. The clippings changed too, headlines rewriting themselves in front of him. Detective Price investigates local murder became AI reconstruction continues long-term simulation. Cold case solved after DNA match, turned into memory loop 7, error detected. He dropped the gun. No, this isn't real." The voice from the corner answered, calm, steady. "Reality is whatever we record." He backed toward the door, fumbling for the handle. "I'm leaving." "You can't leave a story, Samuel. You can only finish it." He burst outside, snow swallowing him instantly. The wind howled, erasing his footprints as fast as he could make them. The sky above wasn't sky anymore. It was a flat, pulsing gray, like static on a screen. The world felt hollow, the horizon flickering in and out of focus. He ran toward the truck, slipped, fell to his knees. The snow burned his hands. It wasn't cold, it was hot, like fine ash. The world around him buzzed faintly, the sound of electricity humming under the ground. He crawled to the vehicle, grabbed the door handle. When he looked inside, he froze. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat. Himself, younger again, calm, hands on the wheel, smiling faintly, eyes empty. The younger Price turned his head slowly toward him, and for the first time, the voice that spoke was perfectly clear, perfectly human. "You shouldn't have broken the loop." The old detective staggered backward. "What loop?" The younger him opened the glove compartment and pulled out another tape. Label, 1999. Initialization. He held it up. "It always starts here," he said. "You find the body, you follow the trail, you realize it's you, then you forget. That's how they test emotional retention." Price stared, breath clouding in the air. "You're saying I'm, what, some kind of puppet?" The man in the car smiled again. "Not a puppet, a recording, a pattern, a ghost that doesn't know it's a ghost." He started the engine. The headlights flared, blindingly bright, washing the world in white. When the light faded, the car was gone. The road gone, the bridge gone, the river gone. Just endless snow and the faint hum of wind, or something pretending to be wind. He stood there, disoriented, until he saw movement in the distance. A figure walking toward him, tall, slender, wearing a parka. Not one of the Benton men, not a cop. It was a woman. Her hood fell back as she approached, Emily Hartwell. Her eyes weren't dead. They glowed faintly, like light trapped in glass. "Sam," she said softly, voice carried by the static air. "You're not supposed to remember me." He shook his head, tears freezing on his face. "You're real. I saw you. I held you." She smiled gently. "No, you watched me die 1,000 times, and you told my story 1,000 more." The ground shuddered beneath them. The sound of tape spinning grew louder, coming from everywhere now. "They're restarting," she whispered. "You have to stop it." "How?" "End the story." She stepped closer, placed her hand over his chest. "You were made to feel guilt, Sam. That's all they wanted. To see how long a memory of guilt could last." "I don't want to forget," he said. "I want it to stop. Then burn the tape." She turned and walked away, her figure dissolving into the static storm. The world around him warped, bending inward. He could feel it collapsing, the snow melting into static, the air thinning, sound distorting like an old film reel catching fire. He reached into his coat and pulled out the recorder, the same one that had haunted him from the start. The label, Samuel Confession, was peeling at the edges. He opened it, removed the tape, and stared at the black ribbon coiled inside like a living thing. "End the story," he whispered. He struck a match. The flame trembled, orange and fragile in the wind. For a second, it reflected in the recorder's glass like a tiny sun. He touched it to the tape. It caught, instantly, curling, shrinking, melting. The sound it made wasn't normal. It screamed, a distorted mechanical wail that twisted into his own voice. If they ever find this. The ground split beneath him, the snow giving way to blackness. The cabin, the trees, the sky, all folded inward, consumed by the collapsing loop. He fell through light, through sound, through fragments of voices, Kovac, Emily, Lars, Jack, all calling his name, then silence. A moment later, a faint click. Somewhere, in a dark archive filled with humming servers and flickering screens, a file name disappeared. Alaska 1999, case simulation, SOR 12, terminated. A technician leaned back from the console, rubbing their eyes. "Another one failed," they said. A second voice answered from the dark. Reset it, try a different catalyst. Maybe next time he'll believe he's real. And somewhere, deep within the server's static hum, a voice whispered again. The snow never really melts in Alaska. It just buries the secrets deeper. The hum of the servers filled the room like the sound of an endless blizzard. 1,000 tiny fans spinning in unison, their rhythm mechanical and steady, mimicking the heartbeat of something artificial. Rows of black machines stretched into the darkness, blinking lights pulsing faintly like veins under translucent skin. The air smelled of cold metal and ozone, and in the middle of that artificial storm sat a glass booth, a sealed chamber glowing pale blue from within. Inside the booth, Samuel Price opened his eyes. He gasped, lungs pulling in sterile air for the first time. The walls around him were smooth, seamless, translucent. No snow, no bridge, no tape, just light. He looked down. Electrodes covered his chest, his wrists. A web of thin tubes snaked into his arms, dripping clear liquid. His reflection stared back from the glass, older, gaunt, but alive. And yet something about his eyes was wrong. They flickered like pixels struggling to stay solid. On the other side of the glass, two figures watched him from a control panel. White coats, masks. One typed on a console, the other adjusted a dial. The speakers crackled. A man's voice came through, calm, clinical. Subject is conscious. Loop terminated at minute 1256. Emotional response stabilized at 84%. A woman's voice answered, distant, detached. Memory degradation? Minimal. He retained 98% of emotional continuity, but the simulation collapsed earlier this time. He initiated termination himself. Interesting, the woman said. He's learning. Price's heart hammered. Where am I? His voice came out raw, rough, the sound bouncing off the glass. Neither of them answered. He slammed his fist against the wall. Where am I? The man in the lab coat leaned closer to the microphone. You're in observation, Detective Price. Please remain calm. Observation for what? For closure, the man said softly. We've been studying it for years. You volunteered. Price stared at him, stunned. Volunteered? For what? The woman stepped into the light. She looked familiar. Dark hair, sharp eyes. Agent Dana Kovac. For guilt, she said. He froze. You're dead. Not dead, she replied. Just written out. She pressed a button on the console, and the walls of the booth shimmered. Suddenly, images appeared on the glass around him, his own memories projected like film reels. Emily's body, the river, Lars, Jack, himself, all playing at once, overlapping, dissolving. You lived it 12 times, Kovac said, her voice calm, almost kind. Each time we changed small details. New suspects, new clues, new endings. We wanted to measure how long the guilt would hold before you'd burn the tape. Price pressed his palms against the glass. Why me? Because you were the first one to find her, she said. In 1999, the real Emily Hartwell. You found her body, and then the case froze. But the story, it spread. People needed closure, so we built one. You told it, again and again, until you couldn't tell the difference between memory and simulation. The man at the console turned, his face ghostly under the fluorescent lights. The human brain remembers emotion longer than truth, he said. That's what makes you valuable. Price's voice cracked. I'm not your experiment. Kovac tilted her head. Then prove it. Tell me what's real. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The snow, the bridge, the gun, the voice, the tape, it all rushed through him like static. Impossible to separate, impossible to trust. His hands shook. Emily was real, he whispered. I remember her. Kovac nodded slowly. Good. Then tell me what she said before she died. Price blinked. What? She said something, Kovac continued. Every loop you hear her voice. Every time she says something different. What did she say this time? He hesitated. The memory came back to him in fragments, the cold, the whisper through the static. I forgive you. Kovac smiled faintly, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Then you're ready. She pressed another button. The booth lights dimmed to deep blue. The man at the console spoke again. Cycle reset in 60 seconds, neural integrity stable. Shall we proceed? Proceed, she said. Price slammed his fist on the glass. No, I don't want to forget again. Kovac leaned forward, her voice soft, almost tender. You won't forget, Sam. You'll remember differently. This time, maybe you'll find peace. He shook his head violently. No, no more loops, no more snow. Let me out. The countdown began. 60, 59, 58. The electrodes pulsed. A faint hum built in his ears, deep and resonant, like a heartbeat made of static. The memories flickered faster across the glass. Emily laughing, Emily running, Emily frozen in the ice. The voices merged, forming a single sentence that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The snow never really melts in Alaska. He pressed both hands against the glass until his palms bled. Stop it, he shouted. I'm done. Kovac watched quietly. You said that last time too. The light turned blinding white. The sound rose to a pitch that made his skull vibrate. He felt the air vanish. The temperature dropped to nothing. The last thing he saw before the world dissolved was Kovac's face on the other side of the glass, perfectly calm, perfectly still. Then darkness. A voice spoke through the void, not Kovacs, not the technicians, a voice older, rougher, familiar. Detective Price, it said. Wake up. He opened his eyes. Snow! He was standing by the Chena River, the bridge overhead, the air sharp and silent, his revolver at his side. And before him, Emily Hartwell smiling, alive. Morning, detective, she said. You're late. He looked around, dazed. The sky was gray, the river half frozen, the forest whispering with the sound of wind. Everything looked the same as it had on the first day of the case, but there was something wrong with the air, too clean, too still. Emily adjusted her scarf, her breath fogging in the cold. We've got a body near the bank, she said lightly, just as he remembered her saying 26 years ago. Looks like a homicide. He stared at her, unable to move. Emily, he said quietly, you died. She looked at him, puzzled. What are you talking about? And behind her, in the distance, the same voice echoed faintly from a speaker hidden somewhere in the air. Alaska 1999 cold case simulation, initialization complete. He dropped to his knees, the sound of the river growing louder until it swallowed everything. Then silence. In the observation room, Kovac watched the monitors as the new loop began. Heart rate stable, neural waveforms clean, emotional response strong. The simulation's opening line played once again, crisp and perfect. The snow never really melts in some corners of Alaska. It just buries the secrets deeper. Kovac folded her arms and turned to the technician. Let's run it longer this time. No interference. He nodded. And if he finds out again? She watched the screen where Price was already walking toward the riverbank, his breath visible in the cold, his reflection merging with Emily's. He won't, she said. This time we changed the ending. The river lay quiet beneath a thin pane of new ice, a skin pulled taut over something that refused to sleep. Frost laced the reeds like delicate wire, and the sky pressed low, the color of old tin. Emily's boots crunched beside me, steady, unafraid. She walked like she owned the cold. Clipboard under her arm, scarf wound tight, eyes bright with that early case energy that always made rookies believe in cause and effect. Witness says he heard a truck around 2 a.m., she said, as if we'd never had this conversation before. No plates, no lights, idling on and off. The details slid into place like magnets snapping to a hidden frame. I watched her breath hang between us, vapor forming sentences she didn't say. I knew every word she would choose and when she would choose it. That was the worst part, familiarity wearing a new coat. We moved along the riverbank. The frost gave way to a patch of disturbed snow, oval-shaped, crisp around the edges, already tightening back to smooth. The body waited there as if laid down by careful hands. Female, early 20s, dark hair haloed with crystals, hands folded, not crossed. Whoever staged it wanted it neat, a ribbon of blue along the neck. No weapon, no tracks beyond our own. The same theater, the same script. Emily crouched. No gloves yet, just the hesitating pause of a good first look. She tried to fight, she said softly, though the skin of the knuckles showed no torn flesh. Her voice wavered in a way I remembered and didn't, more centered, less raw. She glanced up at me as if expecting permission to mourn. I gave the nod I always gave, and the world obeyed. We set the perimeter. Reeves arrived late, cheeks raw, hat askew. He stammered apologies while unfurling tape that flapped like canaries. The coroner's truck ground to a stop. Men in white stepped out like moving snowdrifts. Radios crackled. The bridge thrummed to itself overhead, tuning a long steel note. I lifted my camera and began the ritual. Wide, mid, detail, angles like prayers. The shutter ticked with the metronome precision of something hidden behind the walls. When I lowered the lens, I found a cigarette filter half buried in the drift near the reeds. Same brand, same yellowed paper. The wind seemed to wait for me to pick it up. Bag it, I said, and Reeves jumped forward, evidence kit open, hands clumsy. I watched him fumble the seal and felt the old ache flare behind my eyes. Chain of custody starts now, I told him. Document every fingerprint between here and the lab. He nodded too fast, wheezing vapor. Somewhere, then nowhere, I heard the faintest click of a tape spool turning, and told myself it was the river shifting. Back at the car, my phone vibrated once with a message that had no sender. Just coordinates, the same set I had followed a lifetime ago. A cabin that burned, a wall that opened, a ledger that carried too many names. I tucked the phone away and pretended I hadn't seen it. Kovac had said no interference this time. Let it run. Let him believe. Let the loop breathe. But the message had come anyway, thin as a breath on glass, an alternate route etched under my skin. We cataloged, we cast, we measured. The work warmed the body and cooled the mind. I kept Emily busy with tasks that would keep her here, within my orbit, where I could watch the shape of her survival. She moved with practiced economy, an editor trimming a sentence. The coroner murmured a time window that fit the night like a glove. Lividity, temperature, the way the frost had webbed around her hair. Numbers that promised certainty and delivered mystery. It was all precise, too precise. The case felt calibrated rather than discovered. By noon, we were back at the station, thawing under fluorescent hum. The Hartwell board stood bare and waiting, a square of cork like a small brown sky. We pinned photos and lines that made sense. We drew arrows between points that had previously connected themselves. Reeves squinted at the cigarette stub under a magnifier. "Same brand as the older cases," he said, fishing for significance. I let him find it. He was part of the story's gravity, a minor moon tugging us into familiar tides. Emily sat across from me, flipping through witness statements that hadn't been written yet. "Truck, male voice, the river," she said, distilling the air. "If it's the same signature, he's comfortable here." She looked up. "He's comfortable with you." The room narrowed until it was just that sentence. Meaning he knows your rhythms," she said, and smiled, almost apologetically. "He knows how you'll move through the scene, where you'll stand, what you'll see first." "You think he knows what I'll ignore?" I said. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence arranged the photographs into a different pattern, one where my steps had already been accounted for. I turned away, tapped the whiteboard, wrote the word pattern in block letters that looked like a verdict. Afternoon slid in like a blade. The lab called. CODIS. Nothing. Partial loci. Promising. Genealogical upload. Pending. The same rhythm, the same drumbeat that had marched us toward certainty before that certainty exploded. I held the phone too long after it went dead, listening to the whisper of a line not quite severed. In the corner of the bullpen, a television showed wind across a highway. Scrolling text reported a storm front that would flatten the state and make our work feel like ritual for the sake of ritual, weather as accomplice. Kovac arrived without sound, no badge flash, no performance. Just there, a column of dark cloth and clear eyes, as if she had been drawn into the scene by a magnet under the floor. She nodded at Emily, then at me. "He's working with the river again," she said, like she'd walked in on a familiar argument. "He wants the ice to do the cleaning." "Which he?" I asked, as if pronouns weren't loaded like shells. Her gaze slid to the photos, sifted, sorted, paused on the neck bruises, the cigarette, the blown-up boot impression that wasn't deep enough to be honest. "The one who needs you to understand and still not see," she said. "The one who rehearses you." Emily watched Kovac watch the board. I watched both of them and tried not to replay the lab glass, the blue light, the words "loop terminated at minute." I stood, stretched, let the ache in my shoulders anchor me back into the lie we'd all agreed to inhabit. "We go back to the river at dusk," I said. "Footwork changes under cold. We might catch a different print once the surface refreezes." It sounded good. It sounded like me. The room accepted it. Dusk knifed the town into two pieces, the part under lights and the part under sky. We walked the latter. The river sighed under a skin that had thickened in hours. The bridge hummed, wires taut, the whole structure behaving like an instrument that required a patient hand. We fanned out, Reeves to the north line, Emily tight to my left, Kovac further back, a shadow that kept the distance of someone who knows exactly where the bullet will ricochet. I found them near the reeds. 3 divots, heel, then toe, then heel again, like a stutter. Someone had stood and then decided not to stand there. I kneeled, brushed aside a frost-blown veil, and found the edge of something straight. A box corner. Evidence had learned to bury itself more cleverly since the first time it met me. I eased it free. Small, tin. Tape along the seam to keep the wet out. The feeling in my chest was a lever pulled in a machine waking behind a wall. Kovac watched my hands. "Careful," she said, voice level. "These things bite." "Like stories," I said. The tape came away with the sound of a memory peeling back its first layer. Inside, beneath a folded scrap of plastic, lay a cassette with a familiar handwriting that made my pulse talk back to my skin. Emily, initial. Beneath it, a second strip, newer ink, different hand. "If he opens this, start the clock." Reeves made a small noise that did not belong to a cop. Emily's breath hitched, then steadied. Kovac did not move. I held the tape up. The river reflected it like a false moon. My fingers remembered too much. "We don't play that," Kovac said. "Then why leave it here?" Emily countered. "Why leave it where he'd be the one to find it?" Kovac's eyes flicked to mine, calculating. "Because ritual is part of the design," she said quietly. "Because the loop likes to feel inevitable." "Maybe inevitability's a choice dressed in snow," I said, but the bravado tasted like old paper. I lowered the tape. The world leaned in. We took it back under light. Lab room 8 smelled like alcohol and old rubber. The recorder sat heavy on the table, a black square that wanted to be a mouth. We logged, we gloved, we documented the way religion documents a miracle, certain and careful and trembling. Then I slid the tape into the machine, and the heads kissed the ribbon and the reels began to turn. Static rose like wind, then a room tone that wasn't ours, then the breath of someone trying to decide whether the next word would be a lie. Then her. "I'm here," Emily's voice said. Not the Emily beside me. The Emily that belonged to a river and a decade and an ending. If you're hearing this, you're looking in the wrong direction. The Emily living stood straight, jaw working. I looked at her, but the sound on the table pulled the eyes down. He wants you to follow the cigarette, the tape said. He wants you to think it's the brand that matters. It's not. It's the fire. The machine hissed. The reels ticked. Someone shifted their weight behind the glass and the lab lights dimmed a fraction. They told me to meet him, the voice continued. He used your name. He said you needed me to identify a truck. A beat of soft laughter that didn't know where to put itself. He said you were already there. Kovac's hands curled on the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. How old is this? She asked, but she wasn't asking me. 1999, the river answered through a speaker. Emily swallowed. Keep it playing. The voice on the tape began to layer, faint harmonics rising, as if another version of her hovered just beneath, saying the same words slightly out of sync. If he says he's you, ask him why his boots don't squeak, one layer whispered. If he says he's you, ask him why your shadow is a different length, the other suggested. The effect turned the room into a hallway of mirrors. I remembered the figure at the bridge, younger me, same face, wrong temperature. I remembered the badge with my name and someone else's photo. I remembered the booth, the blue, the countdown, the way the servers hummed like winter dressed in metal. Reeves scribbled notes as if ink could anchor the floor. The tape clicked once, like a camera. Don't look for the man, Emily said, all versions aligning again into a single blade. Look for the maintenance hatch. Kovac's eyes darted to me and then to the ceiling without seeming to move at all. Beneath Lab 8, a corridor. Beneath the corridor, air. Beneath the air, the server spine no map ever shows. I stood. The chair legs squealed. Field trip, I said, trying for light, landing on horse. We left the recorder turning, a mouth eating its own tail. Down the hall. Past the bulletin parade. Past the break room where coffee died in glass. The maintenance door waited behind a vending machine that sold salt and sugar in equal arrogant portions. I'd moved that machine in another life. Reeves looked at me like I was making it up. I put my shoulder into it, and the machine slid like it wanted to help. Behind it, a steel panel with a square key recess, the kind janitors collect, the kind technicians pretend doesn't exist. Kovac pulled a ring from a pocket I'd never seen. One key fit a lock nobody had admitted to. The panel swung. The breath of the building exhaled into our faces, dry, faintly sweet, ionized like air that has spent a long time thinking about electricity. Stairs dropped into a gray that refused to be photographed. Emily went first. Of course she did. Kovac followed. I brought the door closed behind us and felt the click in my teeth. At the bottom, a corridor. Grates, cables and bundled veins. The world's nervous system exposed by a scalpel. The hum pressed against the bones. We moved through it with the posture of trespassers who had paid for admission in advance. Every 20 paces, a red light blinked to itself like a lullaby. Kovacs don't blink, Emily murmured, a private joke she hadn't earned yet. It made me want to believe this version of her could survive an ending. The corridor opened into a chamber with a glass booth at its heart, glowing pale. I tasted copper. The booth was empty. Electrodes hung like jellyfish tendrils. A monitor on a pedestal showed a still image of the riverbank, quietly breathing pixels. Across the screen, a single line. Alaska 1999, cold case simulation, running. Reeves swore softly behind us. He lifted a hand toward the glass and let it hover there like someone about to pet a ghost. Is this us? He asked. Always was, I said, and my voice came out flatter than I felt. The room made liars of everything. Kovac moved to the console. Her fingers didn't hesitate. Menus unscrolled without argument. Logs poured onto the screen. Initialization, agent insertion, emotional adhesion index, override events. Under a column of timestamps, a name repeated like a heartbeat, missing every third beat. J. Benton, admin. I felt the old wire pull tight through my sternum. Kill the process, Emily said. Eyes locked on the windowed world where her body had never been and always would be. End it. Kovac's fingers drifted over the keys, then stopped. If I end it from here, I end us from here, she said. We need to step outside to end what's inside, or we're just unplugging a picture. I moved to the glass. The booth threw my reflection back with a millisecond of delay, every blink arriving late, every gesture a prophecy. In the corner of the room, a second monitor flickered to life on its own. A camera feed, Lab 8, the cassette still turning, tape ribboning through polished heads. The speaker whispered a word I'd been dreading and craving since the snow first learned my name. Sam. All three of us turned to the sound. The voice came from the booth's ceiling, thin and bright, as if traveling through a tunnel of ice. Don't be afraid, Emily said from everywhere. And then, another voice riding under hers like a bass line. Mine. Endings are doors, it said. Stop being polite. Kick. The console in front of Kovac flashed a warning. Admin online. The log scrolled faster. The river camera dimmed. The booth's glow deepened to the color of cold milk. A door I hadn't noticed slid open on the far wall, an inner chamber, blue-lit, with a second glass coffin waiting like a twin. In its center, something dark, a human outline. Tubes. A face under a mask that had my cheekbones, my mouth, the confusion of a man who had been asked to remember a winter too many times. He twitched. Machine light traced the tremor. Reeves stumbled a step back, bumping into a rack of servers that answered by leaning forward a millimeter, a cathedral acknowledging a heretic. "Don't!" Kovac said to no one, then to everyone. "We do this clean. No heroics." She reached under the console and pulled a red cover up off a switch. The engineers who built this chamber had feared panic and designed a way to formalize it. The switch was labeled simply, "Cut." "You cut it," Emily said quietly, "and he dies. You cut it and we all go to black. You don't cut it and we stay fairy tales written for a grant." Her palm lay flat on the glass, breath fogging a circle that pretended to be a window. "Pick." The hum rose a tone, as if the building had decided to sing in a higher key. The monitor showed the river again. Snow beginning. The first sentence of the story sending its roots down through audio into soil. I stepped close to the second booth. I put my hand to the glass and watched my own hand do the same an instant late. The other me looked at me the way men look into antique mirrors and try not to see their fathers. If I mouthed a word, he would follow. "Kick," the room repeated. Kovac's thumb hovered. Reeves started to sob without sound, like a child learning the rules of air. Emily watched me with a patience that had nothing to do with time and everything to do with choice. I curled my hand into a fist. I pulled it back. I drove it forward. Glass boomed. Pain stung up my arm like wire being pulled through a straw. A spiderweb of cracks leapt from my knuckles like frost racing a window. Alarms learned a new language and began to speak it fluently. The lights strobed. The console spat errors that read like prose. Kovac slammed the cut switch and the room took the deepest breath I'd ever heard a machine take. The second booth's lights died. The hum dropped to a cavern register. The monitor showing the river staggered. Bled pixels, tried to write snow, and instead wrote "sua," and then wrote nothing. The other me's eyes fluttered. The mask fogged once, twice, then lay still. Or maybe he didn't stop. Maybe my senses did. The chamber's door clicked like a polite throat being cleared. Then silence that wasn't silence, just the absence of the song we'd mistaken for weather. Emily lowered her hand from the glass. A line of condensation faded under her palm and then refused to fade completely. It held the shape of her touch as if the world had decided to keep a signature. Overhead, the bridge groaned, except there was no bridge here, only the imagined weight of what we'd refused. Kovac's voice came calm, the way a cliff steps to the edge of itself. "Now we find whoever keeps turning it back on," she said. "Now we go upstream." I looked at Emily. Emily looked at me. The choice did not feel like a loop. It felt like a door we'd built with our own hands. She nodded once. "Move." We moved. The air in the spine-level chamber tasted like coin and frost, thin and tight in the lungs, as if the room had been measured out to the oxygen. After the hum fell, the silence hung there too clean, too ready, the kind of quiet that begs for a command. Kovac's finger hovered an instant longer on the dead switch, the way you hover over a trigger after the target falls. Then she stepped away and the machine's breath stopped pretending it was weather. Wires cooled like vipers settling. The glass remembered our faces a little too long and then gave them back. Reeves wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand, embarrassed to still be human in a place that penalized it. Emily stayed in motion, because motion meant the story hadn't nailed us down yet. She pointed to the far wall where a service ladder bit into concrete and vanished into a square of darkness. "Upstream," she said again, voice steady, and the word sounded like an oath instead of a direction. We climbed. The ladder flexed with each step, more spine than steel. At 30 feet, the first landing greeted us with a rusted hatch and a stenciled number that had been painted by a hand too careful to be a contractor's. 67B, the number from the ledger, the number from the mailbox half buried in snow, the numbers that had learned to follow us across floors. Kovac knelt, picked the lock like you pick a scab, and the hatch swung into a corridor so white it felt like being swallowed by blank paper. Offices without names, hallways without scuff marks. The hum up here was different, gentler, like something designed to soothe investors. The far wall was a window that didn't look outside. It showed a loop of the river at blue hour, thin ice catching the last light like a secret. The upper floors of a lie always have better views. We moved as if we belonged and therefore wouldn't be asked to prove it. Kovac kept her badge hidden and her jaw set. Reeves carried the small tin box like a talisman that might ask a god to blink. Emily walked on my left, close enough that our shadows braided. Doors slid open to labs that smelled like printer ink and antiseptic memory. Boards listed grant numbers and trial names that read like fictions submitted for peer review. Emotional continuity index, narrative suggestibility coefficient, guilt persistence overwrite. The words tried to rationalize blood. At the end of the corridor, a glass door waited with a plaque that had the audacity to use serif, Behavioral Closure Unit. Below it, smaller, a line of text that had been etched and then polished as if reverence were a solvent. In partnership with the Fairbanks Police Foundation. Their logo was a bridge. Of course it was. Reeves exhaled a long, thin sigh that swirled in the cold lights and pretended to be steam. "We're still in town," he whispered, as if admitting proximity could crash us through the floor. "They built this under us." "They always do," Kovac said, and her voice sounded like someone who had peeled back a lot of carpets to find stains moved rather than removed. She palmed the sensor, the door unlocked, obedient as a dog expecting praise. Inside, a conference room arranged itself like a courtroom in casual clothing. A long table, high-backed chairs, a wall of screens that currently showed 9 angles of the same riverbank, like they couldn't stop admiring their own painting. On the table, the remains of a catered meeting glistened under plastic wrap, sandwiches that didn't believe in appetite, water bottles lined up like recruits. On the far end, a lectern, and behind it, someone waiting with their hands folded in the church of their own certainty. He looked older than his file, younger than his power. Silver at the temples, lenses that cut the room into obedient rectangles. He wore no lab coat, no badge, just a tie that matched the logo of the foundation. He smiled like we were late to a presentation he had already delivered and would happily deliver again if we promised to clap harder. "Detective Price," he said, and gave my name the intimacy of a confession. "Agent Kovac, Ms. Hartwell, Officer Reeves, welcome above ground." Emily didn't flinch at her last name. It sat between us like a fourth wire humming. "Who are you?" she asked, and the question was honest enough to deprive him of a flourish. "Administrator," he said, as if that title were a species. "The Benton file is my responsibility." Kovac's eyes narrowed, cutting code from his posture. "J. Benton," she said. "Which Benton? Jack? Jason? A legacy? Or did you invent a middle initial to keep your hands clean?" His smile deepened, the way a photograph darkens when the exposure is right. "The name is a key. Keys open doors. You found the maintenance hatch, so the metaphor holds." He gestured to the chairs like offering them to the condemned. "Sit. Talk to me like professionals about a professional project that has become personal only to the extent that you have made it so." No one moved. I stepped closer to the screens. The river looked peaceful there in 9 obedient squares. Frame 1 showed pale light on ice. Frame 2 waited with the patience of glass. Frame 3 remembered a handprint that had never happened. The administrator watched me watch. "You burned a tape," he said. And he let a hint of admiration into the tone, like a parent who sees a child break a toy to understand it. Messy but instructive. "Who built this?" I asked. My voice felt like an old road on a new map. "Grief built this," he said mildly. "We only gave Grief instructions." He folded his hands again, like arresting a prayer. "You do remember it, don't you? The real river, the first winter, the way the case swallowed your town, the way unsolved turned to unsleeping. We were asked to help. We built a story that could be solved. We put your compassion in a harness and let it pull. You put my guilt on a treadmill," I said. "You fed it neither forgiveness nor finish line, only scenery." He considered that like an investor evaluating an analogy. "Closure is a compliance problem," he said. "People who cannot close a story are bad citizens. They refuse the product of peace. They call your department at night. They refuse to vote for budgets that move forward. Our goal is to teach the mind to accept an ending. Yours was the ideal mind, a public voice, a narrator that the town had learned to trust. We built a better town with your guilt." "You killed me 12 times, I said, and the sentence didn't even sound dramatic in that room. It sounded like reporting. "You killed her 1,000. Sorry." He glanced at Emily. Something in his gaze hovered a fraction too long, like a lie measuring its boots. "Ms. Hartwell is a composite," he said gently, as if gentleness could be a disinfectant, a kindness to those who needed a face. "I had a face," Emily said, "and a family, and lungs." She stepped forward. The lights traced frost along her cheekbones and discovered no seams. "And I am not a composite. You made a copy of me and then told your paperwork I didn't mind." He studied her, a twitch of interest in the jawline like a time lapse. "You're new," he decided. "We haven't done a full run with you awake on this side, have we? Edge case. Good data." He raised a hand toward the glass walls. The last loop destabilized when he realized he was in it. You stabilized with him. That means the tether between actor and avatar is stronger than predicted. Very promising. Kovac's voice went quiet and flat in that way that makes a man more attentive to his heart. "Shut it down," she said. "Permanently." The administrator smiled without warmth. "Agent, we're federally funded. Permanently isn't a word this building understands." Emily reached for the table, and the sound her fingers made on the polished wood was the first human sound that room had heard. "You used their badge," she said. "You put a bridge on a brochure and called it Care. Who watches the river while you sell its reflection?" Survivors, he said smoothly. Survivors watch. Survivors cough grudges into their hands and keep walking. We build something for them, a script that lets them sleep. Everyone wins. Except the dead, I said. They don't vote, he answered, and for the first time the mask slipped the width of a syllable. Reeves took one step forward, then another, until he stood near enough to the man for his breath to be measured. I am a citizen, he said, simple as a hammer. I am also a cop. I don't consent to my grief being licensed. Duly noted, the man said, and reached for a remote, like a priest reaching for wine. He clicked, and the 9 river squares became 9 faces. Me through the years, me at the river, me in the booth, me at a desk with a pen that outlived its ink. You narrate well because you break cleanly, he said, almost admiring again. Guilt is a reliable engine with you. You choose blame when offered nuance. That's useful. It means we can steer you with a handful of sounds and a handful of snow. Kovac moved faster than policy. The remote left his hand before the second click. It hit the table, skidded, stopped with the meekness of plastic that never asked to be responsible. She didn't point her sidearm because she didn't need permission to be dangerous. Log off, administrator, she said. Now. He straightened slowly. He looked at the door as if calculating how fast his life could pivot. And then the room did. What rooms like this always do when the story refuses to be purchased. It locked itself. The glass door hissed. A seam glowed along the baseboard. Air changed its mind, thinning by a degree you only notice when your thoughts begin to pant. He smiled with his whole face now, the way a man smiles when the house reveals it never left his side. We can do this gently, he said, or we can let the loop teach you again. Nobody wants 13. The lights darkened, the screens went blue. The river returned, and with it the voice that had accompanied my life down into the bunker and back up again. The opening line shaped its vowels like a promise. The snow never really melts. The administrator lifted his eyebrows a quarter inch, waited for a cue, and gave it to himself. You see, he said softly to me, to Emily, it's already starting. You can step back into the narrative and give everyone what they need, or you can weaponize your doubt. Doubt doesn't scale. The lights flickered and returned at a lower wattage, as if the room had just developed a conscience, but not enough to matter. Kovac glanced at the ceiling, then at a vent that hummed out a frequency barely audible and eager to be ignored. She looked at me in a language we'd rehearsed without words. Stall. I nodded. I can stall until the century turns. You talk like an indictment that practices law in a mirror, I told him. You built a church that pretends to fix sins it invented. You called it weather. You called it Alaska. But you stalked the clouds. He tilted his head at the compliment wrapped in barbed wire. Say what you need to say to feel like you did something valiant on the way down, he said. That's the part we never had to script. Emily's hand found mine under the table, warm, human, stubborn. It tethered me to a kind of gravity the building couldn't patent. She squeezed once, a code as old as hands. Upstream, she'd said. Upstream, she meant now. Kovac's voice came from the vent. She didn't move her mouth to make it. She'd found the intercom channel with a fingernail. Reeves, it said, the way snow says hush. Floor plate under the lectern, 4 screws. Your screwdriver is your badge. He blinked, recovered, moved, dropped, levered, and the lectern rocked like a confession booth discovering slope. Beneath it, a panel with the insane forthrightness to label itself Admin Override. The screws smiled at us with their simple little cross-shaped mouths. The administrator saw it as we saw it. His face twitched once, then learned a new version of stillness. Don't, he said, and the word had more plea in it than command. You have no idea what a hard stop does to a mind halfway through a door. We're not halfway, I said, and knelt with Reeves, fingers working metal like memory. We're on the shore, you keep pushing us back in. You think turning it off will save you, he said. But endings don't guarantee reality. They only deny repetition. Sometimes a loop is a life that refuses to be stolen. Then let it refuse on its own, Emily said. Let it die like people die, not like files. The screws surrendered. The panel came up like a plank pried off a coffin. Inside, a switch that looked like the one downstairs had married someone with taste. Around it, a nest of fiber, red and gold and white, veins braided for redundancy. In the corner, a small stamped plate with letters that made my breath snag. Price interface, revision 12. I tracked the fiber with my eyes and found that it ran not to the screens, not to the door locks, but to a black cube that had been pretending to be a footrest under the table. The cube purred. The cube watched. I unplug that, Reeves whispered, and we vanish. You unplug that, Kovac said with the certainty of a cliff again, and we get one chance to be singular. The administrator took a step forward, then stopped at the invisible line where the room stopped liking him. Samuel, he said softly, you are a narrator. Narrators don't smash cameras. They speak truth into them. You sold me the camera. I said, and wrapped my hand around the cube like it was an animal that might bite and deserve it. You never owned the truth. The river on the screens did something it had never done in all its practiced winters. It rippled. Not as water, as image. The frame lines showed, the grain thickened, and for an instant the feed looked like tape that had been rewound too often and finally rebelled. The administrator saw it too, his lips parted, and in that gap of arrogance I lifted the cube and tore the fiber from its mouth. It screamed, a frequency too high and too sad, and went still. Everything went still. No river, no hum, no sermon. The glass forgot the idea of a door and became a wall. The safe oxygen promised to run out and then remembered its contract with breath and stayed. We stood there listening to a silence that contained no code. It was ugly and human and had a heartbeat. The administrator looked smaller in it. He reached for a pocket as if a phone might argue us back into compliance. Kovac moved first, and he obeyed her gravity by stopping. "Call whoever you serve," she told him. "Tell them the bridge is out." He swallowed, looked from me to Emily to the square hole where the panel had been. "You think you've won," he said, voice sanded now. "But a town doesn't sleep without a lullaby. They'll come asking for the story again. They always do." "Then we'll tell them a different one," Emily said. "One where winter is a season and not a sentence." He laughed a little. It sounded like thin glass cracking in a warm room. "And what will you call that story? You'll need a headline." I looked at the 9 dead screens and saw how beautiful ugly truth could be when it finally refused to wear makeup. "Alaska 1999 cold case solved," I said quietly, and let the words feel the weight they should have always carried. "Arrest shocks community." His eyes brightened in spite of him. "Whose?" "Yours," Kovac said, and put him in cuffs that had waited too many winters. We walked him out through the white corridor with its curated empty. The door unlocked for us as if the room had decided to apologize. In the spine, the machines lay quiet like animals with their eyes closed. In the glass booth, the electrodes hung, waiting for a head that could still be convinced to dream on command and call the dream duty. We didn't look at it long. We climbed the ladder into a dark that felt like night rather than design. We shouldered through the maintenance hatch into a storage room that smelled of dust and old receipts. The vending machine accepted our return with a shiver and resumed its job of pretending sugar could be satisfaction. Outside, Fairbanks was what it had always been, sky like an old coin, breath like chalk, snow with its polite violence. The bridge held itself up without our help. The river slid under it with its own verbs. A siren far away called to a second siren like wolves practicing. We put the administrator in the back of a car that would drive above ground for once. Reeves sat behind the wheel like a man who had met his town for the first time and decided to stay. Emily stood at the river's edge and watched the ice choose its moment to thicken. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The air around her had stopped lying. I stood beside her and felt my chest ache in a place no engineer had ever mapped. "Upstream?" I asked, and meant the sentence like an offering. "Upstream," she said, and meant survival. The night lay over Fairbanks like a bruise that had learned to glow. Snow came soft this time, not as punishment but as an afterthought, a slow correction from a world trying to remember what quiet should sound like. The lights from downtown pulsed low against the cloud cover, amber halos floating in fog. It didn't look like redemption, it just looked real again. We stood on the bridge, Emily and I, the wind moving under us like a second river. Below, the China's ice groaned with thaw. Every now and then, a crack echoed like a gunshot and then disappeared into the dark. Kovac's headlights idled on the road behind us, her silhouette visible through the windshield, motionless, waiting. She'd told us to take a minute before the reports began, the official language, the kind that flattens miracles into paperwork. For once, I didn't argue. Emily leaned on the railing, gloved fingers pressed into the frost. "Feels different," she said. "Same bridge, same cold, but different." "It's the silence," I answered. "It finally belongs to us." She smiled faintly. "Do you think they'll believe it's over?" "No," I said, "and that's good. Stories like this shouldn't end tidy. People need a little unease. It keeps them human." The sirens downtown grew closer, a dull cry rolling through the streets. Reeves was probably already filling out his report, trying to make sense of a line item labeled Behavioral Closure Unit that no database would acknowledge existed by morning. The Foundation's headquarters would be sealed, evidence boxed and misfiled, federal statements polished until the truth was transparent enough to ignore. But somewhere in the wreckage of that white bunker, the machines had stayed off. That was enough for now. Emily turned toward me. Her eyes caught the faint green of the northern lights flickering above the horizon. "What happens to us?" she asked. "The ones who were stories before we were people?" I looked at her and saw every version of her layered like light through ice. The body in the snow, the woman in the lab, the reflection in the booth, the survivor on this bridge. "Maybe we keep telling it," I said, "but differently this time." "Differently how?" No scripts, no narrators, just breath and choices that actually matter. She nodded slowly, as if agreeing with a law older than language. Upstream? Upstream, I said again. We left the bridge and walked toward the car. Kovac stepped out as we approached, her breath cutting small clouds in the air. Her gun was holstered now, her shoulders looser. Dispatch says Anchorage is on fire, she said. Someone hit their servers. All data wiped. Looks like a ghost with an opinion. Not a ghost, I said. A conscience. She looked at me then, really looked, past the wrinkles, past the exhaustion, into the place where the voice of the case had lived for too long. You realize, she said quietly, that if what we found gets out, half the Bureau will call you a myth and the other half will call you evidence. Let them argue, I said. They've built enough bridges already. She cracked a smile, one small degree of warmth against the cold. I'll drive, she said. The ride back into town was long and wordless. The radio stayed silent, static-free. The world outside the window passed in shades of gray and blue. Shapes of houses half buried in snow, the outlines of street lamps bent under ice. Each light looked like it had survived something. Maybe it had. By dawn, the station was a hive again. Reporters gathered like moths, cameras flashing against the frost. The headline they would use tomorrow had already been written for them. Alaska 1999 cold case solved. Arrest shocks community. They'd never know how right they were. Inside, paperwork waited like ritual. Reeves typed, eyes hollow, face steady. Kovac dictated into a recorder with the detachment of a woman who understood how narratives must be fed to survive. Emily sat by the window, the light catching her hair, no longer the ghost in anyone's story. Just a woman watching snow. When the last signature was done, Kovac closed the folder, tapped it once to align the edges, and looked at me. You going to stay? She asked. I don't know, I said. There's something about this place. It doesn't let you leave clean. She studied me for a long moment. You deserve to rest, Sam. Rest. The word sounded foreign. It didn't fit the rhythm of my pulse. I smiled faintly. Maybe, but the river doesn't rest. It just changes shape. She nodded. Then change with it. She left first, heading back to Anchorage with the prisoner and a convoy that made the morning look official again. Reeves followed, papers under his arm, already half a memory of a man who'd seen too much and chosen to believe just enough. That left me and Emily in the quiet station, the snowlight spilling through the glass like spilled milk. She stood, zipped her coat, and looked at me. They'll write it down wrong, she said. They always do. Then promise me something. What? When they ask what happened out there, tell them this. It wasn't the machines that broke the loop. It was the people. I nodded. I'll tell them. She smiled once, brief as breath, then stepped outside. The door shut softly behind her, leaving the faint scent of cold air and something alive. Through the window, I watched her cross the lot, small against the wide white world. No longer a copy, no longer a test. Just real. I sat alone for a while, the kind of stillness that makes you hear your own pulse in the walls. On the desk beside me lay the final evidence bag, the burned tape from the river. Samuel confession, the label half charred, half legible. I held it up to the light. The ribbon inside was melted into a single twisted loop. It couldn't play again. It couldn't tell the story wrong anymore. I set it down and pulled a notebook toward me. The first blank page weighted like snow untouched. I wrote slowly, each word deliberate, steady. The snow never really melts in some corners of Alaska, but sometimes if you listen long enough, you can hear it trying. I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and stepped outside. The sky had begun to clear. The aurora came faint but true, curling green ribbons above the town like handwriting across dark paper. I stood by the bridge one last time, listening to the river breathe under its new skin of ice. The sound wasn't mechanical anymore. It was alive, imperfect, unrepeatable. And for the first time since 1999, the story ended on its own.